Yeah. Do I need to start over? Oh, they didn't hear any of that. Okay. All right. Good afternoon. I am Councilmember Zachary Parker, Chair of the Committee on Youth Affairs. Today is Wednesday, June 11, 2025. We are meeting in room 123 of the John A. Wilson Building and virtually via Zoom. The time is now 12:12 p.m. and I'm calling to order this public oversight hearing for the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, or DYRS. It is important to situate this hearing in the context of several performance oversight hearings, roundtables, site visits, and discussions we've conducted over the past 9 months with the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. In that time, the committee has zeroed in on key concerns, including the need for better educational programming for youth within DYRS's care, full implementation of the Road Act, addressing staffing and management structures within the agency, promoting increased activities and rehabilitative programming, and making needed improvements to bring the agency's facilities into compliance with fire and safety codes. As today's hearing serves as the agency's fiscal year 26 budget oversight hearing, my questions will focus on how these key performance concerns are not supported in the current $96 million DYRS budget proposal and how we might move forward with a budget that meets the moment of successfully rehabilitating the district's detained youth and reducing recidivism. For educational programming, I am particularly interested in looking forward to hearing from the Maya Angelou Academy, which currently provides on-site educational programming at both YSC, or the Youth Services Center, in Ward 5, and New Beginnings Youth Development Center in Laurel, Maryland. I want to ensure Maya Angelou Academy is equipped with the resources and funding they need to reach all youth in which DYRS serves. This includes looking at teacher pay equity and having the funding in place to retain education providers. I also want to emphasize the importance of investing in meaningful programming and in-unit activities to provide an appropriate level of stimulation and foster greater success with rehabilitation of detained youth. During this year's performance oversight hearing, DYRS made commitments to increasing activities available to youth in its care, and I look forward to hearing updates on these efforts. Conversations about full implementation of the Road Act have been ongoing with the agency and the auditor's team. And the Committee on Youth Affairs is committed to allocating whatever funds are necessary to ensure this can happen. One of the key issues that has come up repeatedly in performance oversight and even made the news this week with important coverage from the Washington Post is the length of stay for youth at YSC and overcrowding at DYRS facilities. While kids wait and linger at YSC, they are not getting the support they need to begin a new life path, and they're not getting any closer to being productive in our communities. For full implementation of the Road Act, DYRS has shared in their budget hearing responses that they need 8 additional FTEs to work in the pre-commitment unit and speed up processing of youth to get them to rehabilitative services faster. We also know DYRS intends to revamp their exit planning processes by January 2026 to better serve the needs of youth re-entering the community. And we hope to hear more about how the exiting staff and fiscal year 26 budget meets this need. On this issue of staffing and management structures, I want to dig into the fiscal year 26's budget's proposal, which includes a 66.7% increase in overtime pay costs. That's roughly $2 million. While I am sympathetic to staffing challenges, I want to explore the ways DYRS is addressing the underlying staffing concerns that have led to such high rates of overtime pay. Finally, I intend to follow up in today's budget oversight hearing on our most recent roundtable with the agency, where we discussed the urgent needs for facility improvements for fire safety. While the agency has meaningfully invested in improved HVAC and IT security, it is not clear how much, if any, of this has translated to fire safety code compliance. The need for fire safety systems is urgent, and my hope is that DYRS can shed light on their plans to keep youth within their facilities safe moving forward. Again, I want to thank public and government witnesses present today to provide testimony on the fiscal year 26 proposed budget for DYRS. I look forward to working together toward our shared goals of meeting the needs of district youth and setting them on a path of success. We will begin with our public witnesses. Each witness will have 3 minutes, and I will call you up in the order that I'm going to ask you to share your testimony. First is Penelope Spain with Open City Advocates, Joshua Miller, Open City Advocates, Kunta Betney, and Larry Greenhill Jr. from the DMV Academy. Seems like we're missing one. We're going to keep going. Magdalena Siongas from the Council for Court Excellence. And Penelope, you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councilmember Parker. Is this microphone working? You hear me? Okay, very good. My name is Penelope Spain. I'm a resident of Ward 4, a mother of 2 children being educated in our public schools, and for the past 20 years have served as CEO of Open City Advocates, which provides legal representation and holistic advocacy to youth who have been committed to DYRS. My message today is simple. Our youth detention facility is dangerously overcrowded, not because of a youth crime wave, but because DYRS is prioritizing the warehousing of children over true rehabilitation and effective treatment. DYRS could make specific changes that would not only reduce overcrowding, but would increase public safety and the well-being of our children. Overcrowding is a choice, and we're asking you to choose differently. The current failures we see at the Youth Services Center and New Beginnings are due to DYRS's own failed policies and practices. Despite countless hours of advocacy and feverishly defending our clients over the past year, Open City Advocates can universally say that DYRS is not completing its assessments any faster, treatment remains minimal, and length of waiting placement has increased. 3 minutes is woefully insufficient for me to outline the full complexity of the matter, so I'll refer you to our written testimony, which is over 20 pages long. Here's a quick overview of how DYRS is contributing to overcrowding to the detriment of positive youth development outcomes and public safety. First, DYRS fails to perform timely and thorough needs assessments, often not completing a needs assessment at all. DYRS fails to regularly or consistently convene team meetings for each young person and their family. DYRS fails to regularly or consistently develop or update individualized rehabilitation plans. DYRS regularly overrides assessments that recommend a community-based placement, instead opting for carceral facilities. DYRS has chosen not to implement a system of graduated sanctions, such as the one included in DYRS's own case management manual, which sadly is universally disregarded these days. Instead, DYRS chooses to respond to infractions merely with incarceration instead of engaging in restorative justice or other creative solutions. Relatedly, DYRS overly relies on detention for technical violations. DYRS fails to cultivate and use community-based services and placements. DYRS consistently fails to conduct meaningful release and reentry planning for New Beginnings or out-of-state placements. But sadly, DYRS does resort to rebooking youth for offenses inside its facilities, leading to further court involvement of our youth and further trauma in an effort to cover for DYRS's own failures to keep children safe or to provide meaningful treatment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we will have Joshua Miller.
Good afternoon. My name is Joshua Miller. I'm Open City Advocates Research and Advocacy Director. It was wonderful to hear your opening statement because I'm here to ask you to include funding for the Road Act in the FY25 supplemental budget and the subsequent FY26 budget. The mayor has requested almost $12 million increased funding for the rest of the year, and you have heard many reasons already why that is sorely needed. But I believe we can find $207,000 to fund needs assessments, family team meetings, and reentry planning, especially since DYRS technically already funds those things through its case management line item. I'd also ask you to prioritize saving the Deputy Auditor for Juvenile Facilities Oversight, the old OIJJFO position, in some form. So the fiscal impact statement for the Road Act's deputy auditor position included lines for a number of different facilities inspectors and analysts, basically the people you need to do on-site inspections at all the out-of-state facilities where DYRS ships children who we don't serve in the district or their community. And we need that oversight since so many of the district's children are shipped to for-profit institutions in faraway states that are often rife with allegations of physical and sexual abuse. If we can't afford that level of oversight right now, I'd argue we can't afford to be so punitive at all. But we at least need the basic population and incident data that OIJJFO gathers and reports, as well as ongoing thematic issue reporting for things like fire safety, psychotropic medications, and chemical restraints, and the upcoming behavioral health report. As we finalize this testimony for this budget oversight hearing at the beginning of the week, we noticed that after cresting at 126 on May 26th, the population of YSC, which only has 98 beds, had fallen to 105 on Monday. We saw similar dips in November and February before similar hearings, perhaps another benefit of oversight. So let me briefly highlight not three, but one example of backsliding from the district's Jerry M settlement obligations that demonstrate why continued independent oversight is needed. Children are warehoused for months awaiting placement. The average length of commitment is 2 years. We have clients who have waited up to 2 months, or I'm sorry, up to 8 months at YSC after being committed, nearly a third of their total time, without the specific treatment a judge determined they need. They are sitting in dead time, receiving minimal education and mental health support, while their well-being deteriorates in a chaotic and often violent environment. So our written testimony has continued to grow because the issues we've been tallying in oversight hearings like this one haven't been addressed. Locking kids up is not a public safety strategy. It is a sign that a system has given up. We are funding a system that manufactures its own crises, traumatizes children of color, and ignores proven effective alternatives. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this matter.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Larry Greenhill Jr.
Thank you. Greetings, Chairperson Parker and committee members. My name is Larry Greenhill Jr. I'm the Executive Director of the DMV Academy, DMVA, located at the Yard Eastern Market, 700 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, Office 2047, Washington, D.C., 2003. On behalf of our DMV Board of Directors, we would like to thank you for your leadership and giving us an opportunity to speak before your budget oversight hearing for the Committee on Youth Affairs. Recently, our DMV board members and I watched your video and learned a lot from your video conducted during your Youth Service Center visit a couple weeks ago at the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. For the DMVA, one of the key statements that you addressed was support needed for young people, namely around education at DYRS. Our nonprofit, part of our nonprofit's mission is to provide educational support needed for young adults to become pre-apprentices, occupational licensed apprentices, and ultimately occupational licensed journey workers and master occupational license journey work in the construction trades. Along with our community business partners and our sponsors, we assist with the much educational support needed for construction project management and opportunities as well. In closing, our DMV board members sincerely hope that funds will be allocated in the DYRS FY 2026 budget to specifically prepare the youth and with educational support focused on apprenticeships that place young people on a pathway to the middle class and business ownership after leaving DYRS. I can personally say educational support for apprenticeships helped my father become a DC electrical licensed journey worker electrician in the 1970s, and it helped me to become a DC electrical licensed journey worker electrician in the 1990s too. Chairperson Parker, again, we thank you for the opportunity to testify before your committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Magdalena Siongas.
Thank you, Chairperson Parker, for the opportunity to present testimony. My name is Magdalena Chungus, and I'm a policy manager for the Council for Core Excellence. My testimony today concerns the proposed operating budget for the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services with a focus on fully funding the implementation of the Recidivism Reduction at DYRS Amendment Act, previously the ROAD Act. Currently, CCE is supporting the Juvenile Justice Advisory Group in providing a report on the ongoing and significant problem of many DC youth being held at the Youth Services Center, which is designed for short-term pre-adjudication detention for long periods while awaiting placement after commitment to DYRS. When fully funded and therefore fully enacted, the Recidivism Reduction Act includes a provision that should help to address one of these delays. That is the need for DYRS to develop individualized rehabilitation plans before dispositional hearings, implement them upon placement, and update them regularly. These plans must assess risk factors, protective factors, and specific needs to reduce recidivism, with a predisposition meeting ensuring input from youth, their families, attorneys, and relevant agencies. Additionally, the law mandates that DYRS begin developing a discharge and reentry plan within 60 days of placement. In looking at the feasibility of implementation, given the proposed budget, the mayor's proposed an increase of roughly $12 million in fiscal year 25 for DYRS and a 3.6% increase in fiscal year 26's operating budget. While it's unclear if funding is included for the implementation of the Recidivism Reduction Act, the fiscal impact statement indicates implementation requires $207,000 in fiscal year 25, and would require DYRS to hire an additional 2 FTEs. However, in their pre-hearing responses to council for this hearing, DYRS indicated the need for more staff beyond what was described in the fiscal impact statement, and we hope that the full number of FTEs be solidified and be fully funded to implement this act. Additionally, beyond the improvements to case management, the Recidivism Reduction Act also provides for permanent oversight of DYRS under the Office of the DC Auditor. This funding would allow for the hiring of 4 new employees to inspect juvenile justice facilities, and ensuring this funding is vital given the proposed elimination of the current oversight body, the Office of Independent Juvenile Justice Facilities Oversight, which has provided valuable oversight since 2021, and publicly available data dashboards. Finally, another aspect of the act requires the mayor to submit a plan to council about unifying the juvenile justice system, and this section of the bill should also be funded. In sum, CCE requests that the council ensure DYRS's budget priority system enhancements. They prioritize system enhancements that improve case management to connect impacted youth to placement faster, ensure continued access to healthcare, and allow for permanent DYRS oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Spain, I wanted to come to you. I appreciate the robust testimony you submitted, but I'm going to still ask you for some questions as a follow-up to your testimony here. As I'm going to just tick through some of the things that you referenced. So the overcrowding issue. What is it your recommendation for how we can address overcrowding at DYRS?
I think that overcrowding is an incredibly complicated issue. That's kind of the heart of my testimony. There are so many different factors that go into it. I'll start at the end of the system, which is new beginnings, for example. So we oftentimes have young people who are waiting on home petition to be released to home, but sadly DYRS is not starting that reentry planning process until literally 2 weeks before home. And then at that point, you know, administrative slowdowns, shortcomings, exacerbate that process. And we oftentimes have young people waiting who have already been deemed ready to go home. They're waiting for many, many weeks. What that does is create a backup of young people who are at the Youth Services Center who are waiting to program at New Beginnings, not having a spot available for them at New Beginnings. So that's one aspect of the awaiting placement. Another aspect is what we oftentimes see, as I mentioned in my testimony, technical violations and a lack of any endorsement of graduated sanctions or other things other than raising a child's level up to a higher level of incarceration. So sadly, we oftentimes see that young people are being stepped back for technical violations and placed into the Youth Services Center. They've already been committed. It kind of starts the whole process over again where there needs to be a new assessment of placement services and things of that sort. Sadly, what typically happens is those young people are raised to a higher level. Again, requiring additional time to spend at Youth Services Center awaiting that placement or being sent over to New Beginnings, again, creating a backlog. I could go on and on. I think
No,
that
I appreciate.
ultimately, I would say that the failure to implement the individualized service plans and to regularly be holding team decision-making meetings and to regularly be engaging young people and their families in their treatment means that all that we're doing is providing punitive solutions. Whereas if we were quicker at identifying the underlying needs and meeting those needs, we wouldn't be needing to place youth at the Youth Services Center at all.
And given your work, we've heard a lot about the doing away with the TDM teams and the impact on having these initial meetings with both the legal representatives, but also parents and the young people. And as you alluded in your testimony, we're also hearing in some instances they may not happen. Last time I was at YSC, I think there was a young person who had been waiting weeks just to even figure out who and where they were going within the agency. Can you speak to some of the changes you've noticed or your team have noticed from when the TDM teams were in place to now, given this new structure we have?
Sure. Well, I think that one of the things that I would like to highlight is the role of care coordinators, which seems at this point not to be coordinating much care, but just to be processing, I'm not sure what, to be quite honest. But I think that the idea between team decision-making meetings is that you are having a regular every 90 days gathering of the young people and their team. Like you mentioned, going to the Youth Services Center, oftentimes we have clients who don't even know who their care coordinator is, or they've been changed so many times, or there's individuals who are stepping in as care coordinators at the agency because there's a lack of care coordinators that are being that are hired. I'm not sure what the staffing issue is there. But if you're not having some mechanism, I don't know if we want to call it youth family team meetings, team decision-making meetings, systems of care meetings, whatever the name is, we must be identifying the needs of the young person and their family. And you just can't do that unless you're gathering around a table and asking the family and the young person what it is they need, what are the challenges that they're facing. So often it's simple things. It's a young person who robs another child for a pair of tennis shoes because they don't have the tennis shoes that they feel comfortable going to school with. These are basic things that if we made the proper investments in our young people and addressed their needs around in a non-punitive way in these team decision-making meetings or other gatherings, we wouldn't be escalating issues to the point that it results in recidivism and higher crime rates in our city.
One more quick follow-up question, and Joshua, feel free to jump in here as well. On the exit planning, that is something that I'm also hyper focused on. What has been the greatest length of time a young person has had to wait in your experience when they are due to be released, but because of processing issues, they are being detained longer?
So my colleague here is pointing out that one of our most recent cases had a 45-day delay. Now, I will say, council member, that we have been working on the reentry planning issues for many, many years. The very first meeting that we had with Director Abed, we asked them to outline what the reentry process looks like, and not necessarily even in the content, but just who is responsible for what signatures and when. And I think it's this inability for the facility staff at New Beginnings to be actively coordinating with the case management staff that are operating in another facility. There's just an absolute breakdown of communication. And it's really not only a breakdown of communication, but a lack of clarity of roles and responsibilities. And so what we see is a lot of just everybody else waiting for everybody else to do the work. And sadly, that's when our team of lawyers steps in and does things like re-enroll young people in school, or just some other very basics that we would expect our youth services agency to be able to tackle. And instead, we're asking our attorneys to do that. And sadly, because there's been a lack of investment in community-based supports, there's also not those gap fillers that we used to have in the community that, would service providers that were able to step in and make sure that whatever the needs are, big or small, that they were being met.
And I mean, it's unconscionable that we would have young people waiting on the front end, waiting on the back end, all because of adult and system failure, which is essentially what is happening at DRS and contributing, I think, to the rates of recidivism that we are seeing. Thank you for that testimony. Mr. Greenhill, I wanted to come to you in terms of the focus on apprenticeships. Are you, is your organization, where are some other areas your organization is working, and how might a focus on apprenticeships work within DRS?
Yeah, so can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we work with the Department of Employment Services too as well, Michael Skinner, to help identify, DC residents that, and also Project Empowerment. One of my board members, Mr. Ballinger, couldn't be here today, but he works with Project Empowerment to identify people that are, returning citizens coming home looking for opportunities.
So
But
they
I-
make referrals, and then I'm assuming your organization connects them with journeymen and others that are out in the field doing work. And are they being paid for this experience?
So yeah, so earn while you learn. That's one of the key phrases, with apprenticeship. OJT, on the job training.
Mhm.
Department of Labor requires, it's for a journeyman electrician, 2,000 hours of on the job training, 144 hours of classroom training for 4 years in order to be recognized as a journeyman electrician. So when we identify a young person or an adult that wants to become, let's say, an electrician like me and my father was, right? We identify them, see where they're at, look at their resume, their algebra, their high school diploma, GED, see what they have in their background, and then we place them, so starting off, say for instance, with people coming, young men and women coming from DYRS, they could easily become, get into our program as a pre-apprentice. Go through the pre-apprenticeship program, 80 hours of curriculum. We also provide on-the-job training, and then that segues them into becoming a first-year apprentice with us and our business partners. And so it's a combined effort of our trade business partners that are our board members that another one of our board members, Mr. Robinson, registered apprenticeship programs with the Department of Employment Services and the Apprenticeship Council. We identify people, we bring them into our, our different drywall. We have a drywall, also apprenticeship program, and a MEP, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing types of apprenticeship programs to help them.
That's
to
helpful.
work.
So what are the basic requirements? It sounds like for the pre-apprenticeship pathway, one doesn't need a diploma or a GED.
No, that's it. So and then we can also help them. That's what I'm saying, Councilman. We identify what their needs are. So if they need to get a GED, or if they need to, if they can't get their high school diploma, or, we help them with that mentoring and tutoring and social skills and soft skills and all that type of stuff to prepare them
And
to
last
work.
question, do you have data just focused on your work and success?
I could provide that to you, Councilman.
If you could, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Education obviously is a big focus of mine. I do believe there's a need for hands-on learning and what used to be dubbed trades, and now more career technical opportunities,
Yes.
both to give these young people something to focus on productively, but also to give them a pathway to earn a living in the future. And so I would be interested in following up with you.
Thank you.
And then Ms. Chongus, I wanted to come to you. Thank you for your testimony focusing on the Road Act. It is a big focus of mine to ensure that we fund this. One of the issues that you raised is the discrepancy between the FIS and what DYRS is saying they need. DYRS is saying they need 8 FTEs to implement the Road Act. I would remind people that the Road Act largely focuses on things that the agency should already be doing, that we're codifying a lot of these expectations into law. And so that is something I'm certainly going to focus on. I will ask you, and I know this wasn't necessarily the focus of your testimony, and this is open to anyone. We're, as I mentioned, hyper-focused on the exit planning. Like what happens to a young person when they leave DYRS to ensure that they don't come back? For the last 2 times I've gone, every young man I talked to had been there before. Every single one of them had been there. And some of them have talked about, oh, I've been here 5, 6, 7 times. That just lets me know what we're doing is not working. And so if I will open that up to you first, Ms. Chungus, if you have ideas of how we might utilize the Road Act to think through like what does long-term exit planning look like for these young people, but others if you care to weigh in.
I think one of the things that also came up in as we're doing this awaiting placement report for the JJAG, we did surveys in partnering with some of the returnees of youth who are awaiting placement. And I think the fact that there is a lack of programming for young people at YSC, when it could be used as an opportunity to support kids with their both educational and other needs while they're spending months, is a missed opportunity. That also helps prepare kids once they're released. So I think that's one way that can be, we could be using that time differently. And I think some of that, even through the case management, right, can be identifying those needs and programming that kids need to be getting. But Josh might also have an answer.
Well, I would say that in my 20 years of working with this population, I've never seen the community-based programs so under-supported. I think that we have to acknowledge that our young people are unique individuals and each of them have different interests and passions. And if we can figure out what those interests and passions are and connect them to community-based services, and not just ones that are solely provided by DYRS, but others that exist throughout our city, that would be incredibly helpful. So through the Road Act, if we can have robust service plans that also allow for some flexibility of funding. So for example, if a young person, wants to learn how to play the drums, that we can use some flexible funding to pay for a music teacher or pay for the National Symphony Orchestra program or whatever it is that they're interested in, not simply silo young people in just delinquency specific programs. So that's incredibly important. And I do think that that also is really important in the service plans that are being provided. And when I was saying about the team meetings is we need to have those community members at the same table. So we're understanding how we're all working together.
Understood. Yeah, no, thank you for that. This is a priority for me, one of several priorities for me this budget. And we are thinking about anchoring this approach around community-based programming because something I've been wrestling with is where does this work live? It shouldn't necessarily live with DYRS once the young person has left. The Office of the Attorney General isn't accurate. We don't really have the right facility, but I think we've landed on the right place. And our hope is the robust planning around those individualized plans for the young people can be used as a vehicle as the young person is exiting DYRS to get them the services and the care they need once they're back in the community. So I'll leave it there. Thank you all for your testimony, and we will go to our next round. Next, we have Gerald Tharp. We also have Sophie's Cazares from DC Veg Week. We have Levon Williams, Hillcrest Children and Family Center. Other ones. You may begin.
Sound like you. All right. Gerald Tharp, Spanish teacher at Blue High School. 3 minutes, right? Let me do this quickly. All right. I think in the city that you have a lot of programs that could be effective, but the leaders of these programs need to be more transformational, authentic, inclusive, service-oriented, and inclusive. And the issue we have is if you have a community leadership program with nepotism or buddy system, it's not going to work. It's going to fail every time. And this is why you see an increase of a lot of crime right now. And you're going to have even more if it's not ascertained in the right way. With the service approach, you have to service each individual child, and you have to look at the child as a human being and not as an object of money or as an object of something that's been dismantled. You have to look at him, from within. And then you have to stay on that particular child, for example, or a cluster of children, to follow them to see if what is working and what's not working. And you have to be in those communities before problems do occur. For example, we just had 1, 2, 3, maybe 7 shootings right now. I can guarantee you that some of those children who lost their lives were students who were not present at school during that time. And I can definitely confirm that because 2 of those students were mine. When I got the call, I had just spoken to one of the children's mother and to the child himself. And I was like, okay, I need you to, to come to school, whatever. And I thought he was going to come. Unfortunately, he did not come. Unfortunately, this tragic incident took place. And then here we are again, but this is a continuous progress system. I really believe that schools there should be a mandate that refrain any DCPS school from putting out children who could possibly go to a certain perimeter within the school to get services. For example, you can't just put them out because you don't want to deal with them. And this is what's happening. I'm a little touched by it because I don't want my children lost life. But if you have a child with truancy after truancy, obviously this child is crying out for help. The same child that could be, no, I'm just using an example for a school. The same child that could be kicked out of Duke Ellington who comes to our setting, if he got kicked out, he was reaching out for someone to listen for something that's going on in his life. But instead of people listening to what could be going on to their lives, they literally just shut him to the side and, and avoid horning in on the child himself, looking at him as just a problem, and then they put him out. And then what happens when a child gets put out of schools? What happens? They either go right back to the streets or they do some other stuff to get themselves, caught up. And this is unfortunate.
No, thank you for your testimony. I know how difficult it is to lose a student, so I appreciate you sharing openly about that. Next, we will have Sophie Cazares. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, you may begin.
Dear Chair Parker and members of the Committee on Youth Affairs, my name is Sophie Cazares, and I'm the community organizer for DC Veg Week, a nonprofit focused on plant-based nutrition and veg-forward economy in the nation's capital. When the DC Council passed the Green Food Purchasing Amendment Act of 2021, you set our city on a course to reduce emissions from food, the second largest source of carbon pollution after fossil fuels, with a goal of cutting food-related emissions 25% by 2030. The first milestone is fiscal year 2025, so now is a critical moment to assess progress and ensure agencies have the support they need to succeed. Our request for DYRS is to create a roadmap for green food. We appreciate Councilmember Parker for including a question on green food procurement in agency oversight. Your engagement has elevated this issue and will assist in agency, council, and community partnership to help this law and the people it benefits succeed. In response to your question, the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services stated that the Environmentally Preferable Products and Services Program for Sustainable Purchasing is managed by OCP in collaboration with the Department of Energy and Environment. DYRS's culinary teams work to comply with DOEE on recommendations from the Green Food Purchasing Amendment Act. The next step is to develop a clear, actionable plan. Our top recommendation: offer a plant-based by default approach. This maintains choice for those who prefer animal products while consistently increasing the selection of climate-friendly eats. Evidence from plant-based by default trials show that people chose plant-based options significantly more when offered first, increasing from less than 10% of the time to as high as 89% of the time. Since New York City's hospital system switched to plant-based defaults, more than half of patients are sticking with the veggie option, which has reduced food's carbon footprint by 36% and saved over $500,000 every year. DYRS can also implement this easy behavioral nudge to help shift consumer behavior. Furthermore, offering good food that is healthy can truly change the diner's experience. Dishes like nachos are already a fan favorite and a great way to incorporate beans as a high fiber and high protein ingredient. Foods like soy chorizo, voted favorite protein by Trader Joe's shoppers, demonstrate how plant-based meals can be fun, familiar, and culturally relevant. A smart investment, strengthening procurement capacity across agencies. We recognize that feedback has surfaced regarding satisfaction with DYRS meals, and we share your commitment to creating a food system that meets the needs of young people in DYRS custody. A recent report by the Redstone Center at GW found that agencies like DYRS would benefit from centralized procurement support. That is where the Office of Food Policy, housed within the Office of Planning, can play a transformative role. We ask that the council designate $150,000 annually to the Office of Food Policy to strengthen values-based food procurement citywide. This funding would allow OFP to assist food purchasing agencies with developing effective solicitations informed by best practices, reaching high-quality vendors, monitoring contract compliance post-award, and creating standardized procurement templates that reflect sustainability and equity goals. This support will be essential in helping DYRS and other agencies succeed in implementing sustainable purchasing that brings dividends back to our city in jobs, environmental protection, and equity. Thank you for your continued leadership on this issue. Your investment in smart, sustainable food policy will help DYRS and other agencies deliver healthier, more climate-friendly food that meets the needs of people they serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Levon Williams.
Good evening, Councilman Parker and other members of the council. I'm coming here with a proposal on behalf of Hillcrest Family and Children's Center. This proposal seeks to formalize a partnership between Hillcrest Family Center and Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, DYRS, to provide a seamless transition for justice involved youth from secure facilities to community-based services. Our goal is to establish a consistent in-facility presence and a streamlined reentry referral so young people are connected to the support they need immediately upon release. Also, upon release, we will use these relationships that we created with the youth in these facilities to identify youth that are pre-detention in the communities. Little history on Hillcrest Family and Children's Center. Hillcrest has a long-standing commitment to serve youth and families in Washington, D.C., especially those impacted by trauma, community violence, substance use, and system involvement. Our services include violence interruption, incredible messages program, behavioral health and trauma-informed therapy, substance use and treatment and counseling, family engagement and case management. Many young men in DYRS custody return to neighborhoods with high rates of violence and limited support without a coordinated handoff. They risk reoffending, substance use, relapse, and further disconnection from vital services. One of the services that we offer to the youth that will be coming into Hillcrest is CBT training that each one of the violence interrupters and members of our team has received. It's a psychological framework that explains how a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are interconnected. It's the foundation of cognitive behavior therapy, a widely used form of treatment for various mental health conditions. In these communities, we understand that trauma is a leading factor to a lot of the mental health issues with a lot of these youth. So CBT trainings that we have received and that we are using to help a lot of these youth, we have a great success record with, the violence that has been going on in the Congress Park area and other areas around the Washington area.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Tharp, I wanted to come to you with questions. So you highlighted truancy. Can you just walk me through what is your experience with the truancy process? when a young person is not in your classroom? Can you, the microphone?
We first inform, usually that's formed the counselor after making initial parental contact. And if we can't get in contact with the parent, then go straight to the, one of the counselors. Counselors do a pretty good job, or the social worker that's upstairs who works well with those students. And then after that, it goes wherever it goes. You know what I'm saying? In other words, they'll contact administration if that doesn't work. And then that's basically a follow-up.
Okay. Truancy is a big issue. That's bigger than just this committee. It is a citywide focus and our current system is broken. I'm very clear-eyed about that. And one of the things I routinely hear from teachers is that they are calling, writing, following up with parents. They're also making referrals per our referral system, and not much is happening thereafter.
I'm gonna be honest, as a teacher who's always, I'm in these neighborhoods every day. I don't feel in my complete heart that these kids are as bad as people think they are. What you see maybe in the Navy Yards and what you see on other parts, it's not who they are, it's who they are becoming and who they want to become to fit in. If schools operated as I'll say as an academic plus social, emotional haven or house, I believe that a lot of these a lot of these truancies would disappear instantly, because the same ones that you have on boxes that come, for example, to my class, who everybody else would be afraid of in a sense, of out in the community, when you meet them one-on-one, they're babies, little babies who are crying out for help, who want someone to listen to them.
I got it. Ms. Cazares, I want to come to you. So your recommendation is to work with DYRS to create a plan for moving towards more green foods, to create a plant-based by default trial. I'm assuming that means where all young people would be offered this plant-based option first. They could thereafter opt out of it if they want it. Is that right?
Yeah, so plant-based by default can function in different ways depending on like if it's buffet style or if it's a different form of however you offer your food. And so we're going to be prioritizing the climate friendly foods first, which are going to be the vegetarian or plant-based option. And they can still choose the meat-based option if they would like. But by centering the plant-based options first, allowing it being like the default, it still allows consumer choice because you can, deviate from that, but it encourages the people to have that instead. And a lot of people end up sticking with the plant-based
And
choice.
do you have examples or models of how these type of trials have been rolled out elsewhere?
Yeah, so it has been successful in New York City. They've done this with all of the hospitals in the city of New York, and it has proven successful by over half of all of the patients have stuck with their plant-based option.
Got it. And then lastly, you talked about strengthening procurement support for DYRS, but also funding an FT in the Office of Procurement for $150,000 so that they can provide a level of expertise during contract negotiations with an eye towards moving and implementing this green food approach. Got it. Okay. I appreciate it, the very concrete recommendations. And so that gives us something to look forward to and follow up on. Mr. Williams, I wanted to come to you, the Hillcrest Children and Family Center. How long have you been connected with this organization? If you could hit the mic.
So before I became a violence interrupter, actually working for Hillcrest, I was working with them, coming to speak with the youth in their TRAP program, and just doing outreach work because I'm also a social media influencer. It's been well over a year now that I've been working with Hillcrest and other organizations in the Washington, D.C. area, to fight this gun violence that
And your idea is that an organization like Hillcrest could come into DYRS to have a presence, but also support young people as they're exiting.
Yes, sir. That's I strongly believe in the success of Hillcrest going into DYRS, helping young guys, with CBT training, with Think Act Do, with changing their
And why,
perspectives.
so I'm just pushing it because, I mean, I'm intrigued by this idea because again, we've been thinking about this, so I think you're onto something.
Mhm.
But why would we ask you and your colleagues to do mental health training versus like behavioral health specialists or mental health specialists?
So, with mental health specialists, well, first, we are certified in CBT training, right? We have taken the classes, took the trainings, and became certified in it. We have been utilizing CBT trainings, where, we have a great success rate, in the red zone areas in Washington, D.C. One of the things that, hinder us is the fact that, the guys that we work with in these communities are, getting arrested, and we are unable to get to them in, DYRS. But however, now the second part of that will be that it's just credibility. It's more appealing for us to go to them. A lot of us, with prior history as juvenile delinquents, and
Absolutely.
and
I have a feeling
just
you
the
have more
ability,
credibility with some
right?
young people than I do.
Right. You see, so it's a lot of people coming out of school with degrees is great. They have, so much education and so much to give them, but they're not as relatable to these young guys as we are.
And that's the piece that I'm most interested in. I would love to, as a follow-up, before you leave today, if we could, like in the next 24 hours, set up a time to talk, because as I mentioned in this budget, we're trying to think about what are the models of support post a young person leaving DRS. Like, yes, we're working on the systems within the agency, but I think we need to catch some of these, especially young men, when they're leaving so that they don't come back. And I
Exactly.
think that's where some of what you're talking about, the mentorship, the guidance,
Exactly.
can give a new path forward, even ensuring they're going to school and or work if that's the path that they need to be on. So
And-
I'm very interested in what you're talking about.
And also with the participants or the tiers that we do work with and build those relationships with, they introduce us to other high risk individuals in the communities that haven't committed a crime yet. And
That's right.
so once we are introduced to other people in the communities that we work with and able to reach out to pre-detention, it's just a success rate for us all the way around the board.
And do you have data from the work you're doing with the Hillcrest Family Center that you could share with us as a
Yes, I
follow-up?
do. I have data. I could call the director, and get all the data that you need.
Okay.
To produce the.
So before you leave, if you could just make sure we have your contact information so we can follow up. But I want to thank you all for your testimony.
Right.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, our next and I believe final panel before we get to the director is going to be Tyrone Parker of the Elders Council, Janice Patterson of the Elders Council, and then Marcel Queen. All right, I'm going to ask Mr. Parker for you to go first. And we acknowledge there is no relation.
Okay. For the sake of the record, but it's always the spirit.
Yes.
First of all, let me thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on the Elders Council, a very rich component of the District of Columbia in the contents of the commitment of the elders that have come together over a period of time. The Elders Council the Elders Council was created as a forum for the agency, DYRS, to engage and hear from their community stakeholders the work of the Elders Council. Is so critical to the agency's ability to recognize and to realize and to inspire and to reduce the incarceration of the youth. We primarily focus on the, let me first give you a little brief history of the Elders Council as to how it came about. It came about by virtue of Clint Lacey, who was at that point in time the director of DYRS in 2018. We had come together pertaining to a number of individuals that was previously incarcerated and reached out to New York City of other individuals that was doing youth and gang intervention work to hold a conference among ourselves. And we met over at Union Temple Baptist Church, about 25 of us. And we began to exchange best practices from a community perspective. Boots on the ground from those individuals that have actually experienced the challenges of incarceration and gang involvement. After that particular conference, Clint Lacey contacted me. He said, Mr. Parker, do you think that you can be able to pull together about 10 individuals that basically have the experience and the commitment of knowing community and have worked in the District of Columbia? So I said, sure. We've then put together 10 individuals. Clint Lacey, DYRS came back with 5 other individuals. This collaboration of the Elders Council, Sankofa, which means in essence, looking forward, going forward while looking back to be able to save the future of our community. And from this particular collaboration of individuals, we focus on 5 to 7 specific areas. We focus on behavior health, substance abuse, trauma-informed, the rites of passage, nightlife youth, family counseling, advocacy, culture, and restorative justice. These were the areas that we brought our expertise to the table. And we met for twice a month for a year. And we were compensated by DYRS. And from that particular time came a report. That report was part of what brings us here today. But what is so interesting, Councilman Parker, is that we came about during the time that the District of Columbia was experiencing a downfall in regards to homicides. Coming in the perspective of once being considered the murder capital of the USA in 2012, we then went on to become one of the best places in the country to live. And it came about by virtue of a collaboration of community. The community perspective was the common denominator that allowed for us to get in front of the curve as well as behind the curve. So when these individuals were in the correctional facility, in the DYRS, we were able to work with them and then begin to prepare them for their own transformation.
Understood. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we're going to have Janice Patterson. And make sure your mic's on.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilmember Parker and staff and all those who are present. I want to, even though we are talking about the Elder Council, I want to take it to a real short, crisp point. One, I'm very happy that I was a part of the Elder Council, but in all of that, I want to be able to say that if heal a parent, heal a child, heal a family, then we'll have safer communities. That's the most important thing. Also, in the council and in the work that Parent Watch does do, we believe in the natural and informal resources, as you know, as we walk the corridors of the facility. What's very important that also what other colleagues said earlier today, and you asked some very important questions around care coordination. You asked very serious questions about TDMs. And I'm really want to say to everything and everyone in this space, That's where it's very crucial that family engagement, parent engagement, youth engagement, and community engagement is entwined in all of this. Written documents, legal documents, legislation, and policy. Because Councilmember Parker, we talk about it all the time. We always say it about it, but it's not integrated into the actual work. So therefore, the dollars are not directed. Everything that my colleague said over there has to do with not parent watch, but parent and family and youth engagement. I don't want to get into us saying the same thing over and again. A lot of our parents cannot say certain things to certain people because of CFSA, because of eviction, because when there's a criminal act, sometimes they lose their vouchers. And these are the intricate things around the natural and informal resources that we do not talk. I heard the gentleman from Hillcrest. We all know the institutional intellectual learned privilege is one thing, but we have to come to cultural humility on status, our standards, and the fact that we all need to value what it is that everyone brings to the table. And so as you visit and you talk with two young men that really explain to you about sometimes they are the responsible adult in their home. So what do we do to change that? Because all the other stuff, stats, data, I mean, I could be up all night giving you data and fancy reports. But the bottom line is what happens in there every day, we need natural and an informal resources and intervention before prevention. Everyone is prevention, prevention, prevention. No, intervention. And as you know, when we communicate and when you talk to those gentlemen, I just want you to go back to your experience, how natural it was that they opened up to you and explain to you what their needs are. And that's sometimes how we have to hold our agency and everyone accountable on looking at the natural needs and having more cultural humility and also non-judgment. And I think Penelope's group said something about penal. And so, of course, the elder council, of course, the elders, of course, when y'all come over in your jeans and t-shirts, our children relate. But please, if we can ensure from that desk, from our director's desk, from your senior staff, that we stop leaving out the value of what is really needed for us to deal with safety, public safety, recidivism, all of it. Our children come from, I wrote it down because I was trying to figure out how I would say it. You know, the youth's needs elevate from intimate trauma environments in their homes, in the community,
Yes.
and even how they interact with the system.
Absolutely.
We want to fix us, but we don't want to fix systemic failure. And so that's what I have to say. I really wasn't prepared to testify because I really am on a healing sabbatical, which you know I've shared with you and my director. But basically, please,
Yes.
it goes for
And we
everybody.
certainly have our work.
Middleton and everybody. Family
Yes.
engagement. Y'all all come from that. You all have families. Even in our courts, the judge called the judge, the lawyer called the lawyer. We have to make sure that we do something to cushion these children where they can have healthy, go back home. And on the care coordinator, the director, I'm always a bad little girl, but I always say uncaring coordinators, not the individuals, but the process.
Understood. Thank you for your testimony. Last, we'll have Marcel Queen.
Hello, my name is Marcellus Queen.
Marcellus, sorry about that.
That's okay. And I just want to start off by saying,
Is the mic on? If you could push the.
so my name is Marcellus Queen. I first want to start off sharing my story. So I'm a Pathway graduate from the Office of Neighborhood Engagement and Safety. I graduated from Pathways about 4 years ago. And from once me graduated from the Pathway program for being a victim of gun violence and also a returning citizen, From there, I was mentored by Ms. Patterson and different community advocates. From there, I was trained by different community advocates, and I started my own programs. I've probably been having my own programs from about 3 years now. As of right now, I'm funded by Howard University and the Community Foundation. I work in Congress Park, and I work with high-risk youth from anywhere ranging from carjackings to possession of firearms. I specifically deal with them. And I also share a dual role as working as a YDR at YSC. I just want to say this work is really hard, especially me coming from juvenile detention centers and me coming through it, me not having a mother, me not having just the structure, you know. So sometimes, and also I was a child that kept going through facility through being aggressive, and I had to keep being placed. I was a child that had to wait 6 to 5 months for placement due to my behavior. Some facilities did not want to keep me. Some facilities felt as though I was too aggressive, and then they had to replace me, right? So just speaking from it, I can say that I was not the easiest child to deal with, right? And I put more on everybody else. But I also want to speak about my organization, Representation for the Bottom. We recently did a partnership with the animal shelter on New York Avenue. So as of right now, I have 12 kids that get trained. They answer phones, they walk the dogs, and 4 times out the week. And these are kids that requiring, if you want to be here, and they get paid $200 every 2 weeks, right? So it keeps them from robbing, it keeps them from stealing cars, and my kids have been charged with carjacking, right? So, and also the good thing that I pay the mothers as the mentors. So I have weekly mother healing circles, because I realize that the mothers go through so much and they're trying to keep their households together, right? And it's not fatherhood in these communities. So the mothers and the men of the community take the kids there to the animal shelter, and they also get trained. They watch oversight over the kids while this is going on. And I'm also here because DYRS, they gave me a chance, and I love working for youth. I love what I do, and I take my skills and I bring it to my job also. So that's what I'm here to do.
I really appreciate that. And that's an inspiring note to end on in terms of our public testimony. If you have data that can support the work of your program, I would love to.
So
have
Dr.
it.
Mitchell, from how the president, Dr. Mitchell, I met Dr.
Yes.
Mitchell through, like, you know, just
I
being
know,
in the
I know
community.
Dr. Mitchell well.
So Roger Mitchell took a liking to me, and Dr. Mitchell, I do the Summer Inspire program, and I take the kids from Congress Park, and he's part of the whole initial. So Dr. Mitchell actually did a study. I said, Dr. Mitchell, hey, I see that the mothers are struggling by themselves, and I see the kids have a different struggle. I said, can you send scientists to Congress Park? Because we did a study with Congress Park and Simple City, because Congress Park and Simple City has the highest recidivism rates, and it has the highest gun violence rates. So he said, Marcellus, hey, what are you thinking? I said, let's see how the mothers feel. Let's see how the kids feel. Let's see how that affects the community. He said scientists, or whatever they call it. And he did data on 96 families in the Congress Park and Simple City community.
Love it.
And in the data, you're going to see that he said, the family said, well, sometimes I don't have food. Sometimes that DC, sometimes we don't make enough money in these communities to keep up, right? So you see the underlying issues on why the mothers and the kids are not really keeping up with everything. So I have no problem sharing. I'm not really here to ask for anything. The community foundation that Dr. Mitchell funded, at least for my kids, can keep going to the animal shelter 3 times a week. I'm just here to support my job and also support my community and help you have a better insight.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for your testimony. Next, we will have the man of the hour, Mr. Director Sam Abed of the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. And Director, if you could raise your right hand. We're trying to get back in the habit of doing this, but we ask all and actually the whole team to do this. So if you could raise your right hand and just repeat after me. I affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Thank you. And Director, you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I get into my testimony, I'd just like to introduce the people on my team that are here joining me and will be taking all the hard questions. So they deserve to be introduced. To my left here is Dr. Ternisha Fish. She is our new Chief of Staff and also serves as our Communications Director. We have Antonio Baxter, who is our liaison to the OCFO's office. We have Natalie Gilliard, who is our Chief Operations Officer. And in the back there is our Human Resources Director, Lenny Moore, and our Budget Director, Brianna Huggins. So good afternoon once again, Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee on Youth Affairs. I am Sam Abbott, Director of Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding DYRS's fiscal year 2026 budget. As I've already mentioned, I'm joined by members of my team, and they will be available to respond to specific budgetary questions that you may have if needed. I want to begin by expressing my continued gratitude for the leadership of Mayor Bowser and Deputy Mayor Apia. Even during times of challenge, the mayor remains laser focused on ensuring that public safety and more specifically youth safety remains a top priority. The mayor's fiscal 26 budget and financial plan reflects the changing circumstances of the district's financial picture in 2025. In building the Grow DC budget, the mayor was guided by our goals: growing DC's economy, right-sizing government spending, cutting red tape, and making it easier to do business in DC and investing in shared priorities. Looking back at fiscal year 24 and 25, I shared my priorities for the agency's fiscal 25 budget. And today I can report that DYRS has made progress, even in the context of shared budgetary sacrifice, using the resources that we have to best serve the rehabilitative needs of our youth. From fiscal 24 to 25, we've utilized our resources to hire additional critical secure program staff. In fiscal 25, we welcome 21 new youth development representatives and supervisors. These direct service roles are critical to ensuring safe facilities and high quality direct supervision and care of our committed youth and our detained youth. DYRS currently has very few vacancies for YDRs, reflecting a well-staffed workforce in this critical area. We've built the Office of Policy and Quality Assurance, and we're, should say, building that quality assurance offices. We have 2 policy officers and 2 quality assurance specialist positions. And then we've also included the licensing and monitoring unit into that organization. We are currently completing the hiring process to fill 2 open positions in the office, but that work has already begun to enhance our ability to strengthen internal policies and procedures. We invested more than $9.6 million in community-based residential programs to expand our continuum of care. As I shared during our performance oversight hearing earlier this year, this significant investment increased the capacity at 3 current local shelter and group homes by 6 beds. As the shelter population has increased, we added 2 new local homes for a total of 14 flexible shelter and group home beds, and we expanded our out-of-state placements for a combined total of 7 beds in enhanced treatment settings to be responsive to the rehabilitative needs of our youth. In fiscal 26, we continue to be focused on building upon the progress we've made to strengthen safety and security, address staffing challenges, and upgrade the internal infrastructure of the agency in service of our youth. This is reflected in our fiscal 26 budget through 3 areas of strategic investment. First area of strategic investment focuses on ensuring facility supervision, security, and safety. Through this investment in our 26 budget, DYRS will enhance our security systems and increase direct care staff at New Beginnings and YSC. Increased staffing will improve safety and security at our 24-hour secure detention facilities. $2.2 million allocated will fund upgrades to the guard tour and fence alarm systems. Additionally, these funds will support the hiring of 6 supervisory youth development representatives and 15 and a half youth development representatives. Additional positions will provide direct care services to youth at YSC and New Beginnings. Second area of strategic investment is focused on employee recruitment, reliability, and retention. Through this area of investment, our fiscal 26 budget will be able to use 2.2 million allocated to implement the best industry practices to address staffing challenges and high turnover by implementing targeted recruitment and retention initiatives for direct care staff. This includes competitive hiring bonuses for staff recruitment, attracting high-quality staff through an employee referral program, reducing staff turnover rates through the establishment of an annual retention incentive program to improve retention, and increasing direct care staff attendance by prioritizing, or I should say, incentivizing good attendance to boost employee reliability and reduce staff callouts. Together, these four initiatives strengthen our workforce by improving overall employee satisfaction, enhancing workforce stability, and ensuring the effective delivery of direct care services to youth. Third area of strategic investment is focused on upgrading our internal operational infrastructure through investing in modernizing our IT systems. A little over $2 million in resources will be used to ensure reliable communications for youth and staff, the protection of sensitive data, and will equip staff with tools they need to meet the demands of compliance, care, and operational efficiency. We will also have critical capital improvement projects. Over $22 million would be invested in various areas. $1.5 million to upgrade network switches at both facilities, $6.7 million to renovate spaces at YSC and create a dedicated dining hall, $500,000 to renovate housing unit bathrooms at New Beginnings, $8.4 million to renovate the central administration building at New Beginnings, $1.7 million for an expansion of the Oasis campus, $1.5 million to build outdoor recreational center and pavilion at New Beginnings, and $2.6 million to replace fleet vehicles, aging DYRS fleet vehicles. Thank you once again for the opportunity to testify. I'm grateful to Mayor Bowser for her ongoing investments in DYRS. These targeted investments not only grow DC, but also contribute to a clean and safe district. They reinforce her commitment to reducing crime and ensuring that youth are held accountable while receiving the rehabilitation they need to ensure public safety. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Director, for your testimony. And we can jump right in. You highlighted the $2 million increase in IT security enhancements as it's going to improve communication between young people at the facility as well as staff. Can you elaborate on exactly what the enhancements will do?
Sure. We have aging IT infrastructure. So these enhancements are going to be around funding for communications devices, the radio systems that we use, for improving the network that we utilize to keep all of our network systems operational. So the network switches and other areas. These are very foundational investments that we need to make sure that our systems maintain functionality. Ms. Gilliard, do you have more detail on that?
If I may, I can run down the list of things.
Yeah,
that will
please.
We are upgrading our Wi-Fi network, replacing wireless access points. We have a very aged system, just so you're
And
aware.
what's the estimate for the Wi-Fi?
I would have to get back to you on the breakdown, but I can give you the full list of what goes into
Okay.
the 2 million. We also are purchasing phones. Our phone systems are outdated, according to Octo, and we have to upgrade those. We're purchasing printers, laptops, desktops, docking stations, and monitors. Our printers are also failing as well. Main printers.
Got it. Okay. And I'm assuming these purchases will require maintenance in the future? And if so, has that been accounted for in the budget?
It has, yes.
And in what way? And what line item? So I guess if we look in the financial plan, the maintenance of these materials are accounted for?
In addition to the IT enhancement, we're also getting $1.5 million from capital that is also assisting. So we will be able to maintain systems through our $2 million plus the 1.5 in capital projects that are going to assist with network switches and network adapters at YSC and New Beginnings.
Okay, and it's difficult to hear, so if you all could
Oh, I'm
speak
sorry.
closer to the mic, that would be helpful. And I want to acknowledge we have been joined by my at-large council colleague, Councilmember Henderson. After this round, I will turn to her for a round of questions. Director, you highlighted the Policy and Quality Assurance Division in your testimony. What data or metrics have been collected or analyzed by the Quality Assurance Division to improve outcomes for the agency so far?
Before I answer that,
Yep.
I just wanted to dovetail on the response there on maintenance. We do have an existing IT team, and they perform along with our facilities maintenance unit, a lot of the maintenance activities, repairs to equipment and those sort of things. So there are a lot of upgrades of equipment,
Got
and
it.
replacing equipment. It's
Got
not
it.
really that those.
So
are-
this is one-time funding for computers, phones, printers, Wi-Fi upgrades.
Right.
Got it. And if you could speak to the Policy and Quality Assurance Division and any of metrics or data they've produced and how it's been used to improve outcomes for the agency.
So, we have been, I will say, struggling to stand up those teams. So we have two individuals that are currently employed in the policy and quality assurance teams, and we have two vacant positions. One of the vacant positions is for one of the lead positions that we are in recruitment for, and we do hope to have a selection soon. And then we need the two analyst positions. I'll have to come back to you with information on how many policies they have promulgated or contributed to. I don't have that information in front of me, but they have already commenced developing policy. And when we have concerns about any programs, that is the team or among the people that will go and respond to evaluate programs.
Understood. So it seems like it's a work in progress. Do you have a projection of or a list of deliverables you're hoping this investment will result in?
Well, the deliverables are going to be initially the development and updating of all of our policies and procedures. That's their main focus. We have to get structure around the work that we do. So when you hear criticism of different operational areas, I look at that and I see that's an opportunity where we need to develop strong procedures, implement that into training, and then roll that out to our staff so that we have the structure in place.
And this is the team that's going to help you do that. So
That's
as we
correct.
check in throughout the year, I'll be following up to see how this team is operating and benefiting the work that you're doing. While we're on the topic of data, I did want to make a request. So it is my understanding for placement data, you are sharing weekly, bi-weekly information with stakeholders around where young people are in their placement process. Can you make a commitment to share that with our committee team as well?
I need to see exactly what you're referring to.
So there's an internal log, as I understand it, that is shared with the courts, I believe the Attorney General's office, on a weekly basis that says, here are the youth at YSC, here's where they're going to be placed, here's their timeline.
So we do share information, obviously, with the courts on progress on individual cases. I believe what you're referring to is something that is related to matters with the DC auditor and requests that they have made to
No,
get information.
I actually, in a conversation with the Attorney General's office, it seems like they're getting this information. And part of the challenge that our committee is facing is we're tasked with conducting oversight without full access to information. And so I wanted to see if you would commit to sharing that information.
So I need to see what it is that we're sharing with
It
the
is the-
Attorney General's office.
It's the
and-
placement timeline for the youth incarcerated at YSC. And we could get it from them, but I would rather not get it from a third party when we can just work directly with the agency, but I will come back to that. And let's make sure we put a note to follow up on that. The proposed budget includes $979,000 for training and development, an increase of about $129,000 compared to fiscal year 25. What additional staff training and development are you expecting to be funded in fiscal year 26?
I don't have the information on any specific training that we are
Okay.
looking to develop. We have increased the number of trainers in our training unit. We have added a dedicated secure programs training individual. So I'm not sure if there is salary that's driving that versus
Okay.
any kind of
So it's going to be
specific
really
need.
important, Director, that we get more specifics because it seems like there are some enhancements without a very strong rationale why we're enhancing it. I think training is important, but I would hope that you all would be able to speak to why we're seeing an increase or there is a need for there. Yeah.
So, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So part of that increase has to do with an FTE that shift over to there. So that's most of the cost. Then I think there was like a little increase in tuition reimbursement.
Now,
for
is that a
employees.
shift of an FT within the agency or
It
is a
is.
new hire?
It is a shift within the agency.
So
It's
why
not a
would
new hire.
So why would we be increasing by 130,000 roughly if it's if it's FT already in the agency?
Well, the FTE was sitting in another activity. And so when it comes over to that specific activity, it will increase the PS costs. And there also was about roughly like 30 to 40,000 that was associated with the NPS.
What line or what division was that FT taken from?
That we would have to get back to you on it, but I know it switched up. I think it was secure. Yeah, secure. Okay.
secure programs.
Secure programs. FT is taken. Okay, that is my time for this round. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Henderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Good afternoon, Director. As you know, I chair the Committee on Health, so I want to ask some health-related questions in terms of the interaction between the two. Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services has released some new guidance with regard to statutory requirements about eligibility of youth detained in public institutions, including jails, prisons, and juvenile justice facilities, around coverage needing to start January 1 of 2025. So some of the things were that states must provide Medicaid and CHIP services to eligible individuals during the transition surrounding their release. Starting in January of 2026, we're prohibited from terminating Medicaid eligibility for incarcerated individuals. And it kind of goes on from there. I understand that you all are partnering with the Department of Healthcare Finance for assistance with coordinating for implementation of this, and that you've pushed the implementation date from January 1 to October 1. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate that we're looking at an October implementation, but I believe that is a result of delays from Medicaid services.
Not from you all.
Right.
Great. Okay. In terms of estimates of population, how many youth do you estimate are eligible for this?
For Medicaid, a number of our youth are already enrolled in Medicaid.
Okay.
I think it would have an impact, and my recollection of the impact in terms of what amount of reimbursement, it was over $1 million in reimbursables for for those services.
That's not a bad thing. That's a
Absolutely.
good thing. You
Yes.
could use that funding for other things. Okay. One part of the bill or the requirement from the feds is that in the 30 days prior to a release, and for at least 30 days following release, the state must provide targeted case management services, including referrals appropriate to care in the geographic region. Do we have the funding to be able to meet those case management requirements?
To do the case management?
Yeah.
Yes, we have case managers and they are being trained on the specifics
Okay.
of compliance with those.
Okay, that's,
Yes.
yes, we do have case managers. I just want to make sure that they're being trained on the piece around, now you got to get these folks connected to healthcare services, which might be a new responsibility as part of their duties. So in terms of implementing this piece, you don't see a need for any additional FTEs at this time?
There's one additional FTE that is grant funded that we need to complete an MOU with Healthcare Finance.
Okay.
The funding was approved and, you know, assuming it doesn't get revoked by the federal government, we should be moving forward with that. You know, don't know exactly when, but it was approved.
Okay, so you need to do execute a MOU with Healthcare Finance in order for that position.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a timeline in terms of when you think that might happen? Hopefully you do it before October 1 is my request.
In the final stages of review with the HCF now.
Okay, great. All right, wonderful. All right. Now, so I'm recognizing that there might be some shifts in terms of the budget tables that we have versus what you all are doing, right? There were some changes in terms of the DIF system. So I have lots of agencies where it may look like you're getting decreased, but you didn't get a decrease. It just moved. This is a little bit different. So my budget materials are showing about a $648,000 increase and 2 additional FTEs under healthcare general line item. And so the description says that the healthcare general account covers food services, acute care services, immunizations, health and wellness education, behavioral health services, preventative and comprehensive medical services to all DYRS youth and secure care. Is that increase accurate?
I believe that is. I know of one position that we have added, which is a nutritionist for our facility operations. So we have a, food service administrator. I'm sorry, I take that back. We have the nutritionist. The additional position is the food service administrator. We had tied those 2 positions kind of together, but the workload is a bit too high to support both of those roles. We're also collaborating with the Challenge Academy, and we are currently providing food service for the National Guard youth that are at the Challenge Academy, which is located on the same campus as New Beginnings. And they are, I believe, partially funding that position.
So in just terms of my reading this correctly, are food services also in another part of your budget?
Yes, it would be in the secure facilities. No.
Okay.
Yes.
So then what are the food services specifically under healthcare? Or is this a poor description of this line?
I think there would be an FTE that's located, but when it comes in terms to like the actual subsidies and transfers,
Yeah.
that is not under that category.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's good to know. Okay. So the proposed FY26 budget also increases your medical account by 299,000, bringing it to a total of about 1.5 million for your medical account. I believe this covers your medical services as well as preventative care, but correct me if I'm wrong.
It does. Medical services, that includes our physician, nursing care.
Yep. Was there a change in contractor spending in terms of the needed increase of funding? Oh, no, you can't do it from back there because we
I got
can't
it.
hear you.
It's
So
okay. It supports staffing contracts and our medication providers.
lean it.
Staffing contracts and medication providers.
Okay, y'all gonna have to hug the mic.
I'm
Either bring it closer to you or do something else so we can just hear you. All right. Okay. In terms of the staffing for nurses and medical staff, where are we in terms of vacancies?
Just give us a few minutes. Our HR director is going to look up that specific vacancy number and we'll get it back to you.
Okay. I mean, look, you got a lot of young people at both of your facilities. I want to make sure that we have enough nurse practitioners or whatever level of care that we have there. Let's see. Okay. I've got a little bit of time so I can go on to the next piece or ish. It's still health related. Director, earlier this year and even last year, we were talking about contraband and some of the youth who are being detained testing positive for a variety of substances, including fentanyl, and which is, incredibly dangerous and those kinds of things. I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to whether or not we've seen any improvements. And by that, I mean reductions in terms of the number of youth whose drug tests are coming back positive.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had excellent success in this area. So as you know, we've enhanced our security. We do searches for everybody that comes in, including all staff and any administrators. And as a result, I don't have the specific number of months, but for several months, consecutive months, we haven't seen positive drug tests. And we do continue testing youth. And so we are seeing a significant reduction, and we can come back to you with more concrete.
Are any of our young people in treatment in terms of receiving services around substance use disorder?
Yes. Yeah, we have a dedicated substance use counselor that works with our youth. And yes, we have youth that are getting those services.
Okay. Is anyone receiving MAT?
I know that's part of our Medicaid expansion. I
Right.
don't believe that we are currently doing MAT
Okay.
as part, but I would need to check with our health
Okay.
services.
Director Faust was right in your seat like a couple hours ago. We were talking about it from the DOC perspective. Obviously, different age groups of what we're dealing with, but it is a treatment course of option that could help if a young person is experiencing some addiction issues. Okay. I want to ask about housing and placement beds. In your FY25 performance oversight testimony, you highlighted that you all were able to secure 27 additional community-based residential beds following a $9.6 million investment that you got. And I want to thank you for prioritizing the safe housing options for youth. That said, I don't think 27 is enough, but like $9.6 million to get 27 beds, that's an interesting ratio. You want to unpack that a little?
Sure. So
Like, is that normal?
yeah, residential beds are expensive.
Okay.
And depending on the level of service that we're receiving, they can get very expensive. So something like a PRTF, a psychiatric residential treatment facility, is going to be among the most expensive.
Like on average, how much?
So maybe $600 to $800 a day is pretty normal in terms of a per diem rate.
Is that the most expensive one?
I need to check to see what is the most expensive one, but that's at the upper end.
Okay, I'm over my time. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. Director, I wanted to come to youth and family programs. DYRS noted that 8 additional FTEs are required to meet the timeline imposed by the Road Act. It's worth noting that the FIS acknowledged that there's a need for 2 additional FTEs. Did you budget for the needed FTEs to implement the Road Act in your fiscal year 26 budget?
So the additional FTEs that we've discussed in our meetings have been what we thought should have been included in the fiscal impact statement, but were not. So those were not included in our budget.
So the difference there is 6 FTEs. Were the 2 FTEs, according to the FIS, included in the budget?
Well, the bill hasn't been funded yet. So if there is funding, then we would certainly fill those positions.
So no, the answer is no. You all did not fund the necessary FTEs to implement the bill. Can you elaborate which team and what are the roles you're expecting these 8 FTs to play as it relates to the Road Act? So if we want to fund it, where should we be funding this and what are the specific roles?
Sure. The roles are essentially creating a second pre-commitment team. So it would be for a supervisor would be one of the positions, another position to organize the predisposition meetings that are required. And then the additional positions would be care coordinators who would be responsible for conducting all of the assessments that are needed. And as you know, in the Road Act, if it does become law, it requires the agency to complete those assessments within 10 days of receiving a notice of intent to commit. And that is the main squeeze, if you will, in terms of resource, because we get notices of intent to commit for kids that might get committed, and some of them that may not get committed. And then the other sort of variable with that is that we may get a notice of intent to commit, but the length of a trial can exceed sometimes a year. So if we do it at 10 days after getting a notice of intent to commit, we do an assessment. That assessment is not going to be valid. And we would have to do another assessment upon the commitment.
Why wouldn't it be valid?
Generally, we should be updating those at least annually, but what we are contemplating is updating them every 90 days in our procedures. And so over the course of an entire year, things probably could be different. And we
But
would
the
need a fresh
criticism,
assessment.
Director, respectfully, that we hear from advocates, parents, community members is that because there is no plan, young people are just lagging behind. And what I'm hearing you arguing now is defending the position that we should just wait till we know we're incarcerating and placing these young people to get the ball rolling.
What I'm saying is if there is an extensive delay, we may need to do a refreshed assessment. Because we rely on those assessments and our providers rely on those
Yes.
assessments.
And the Road
and
Act also has requirements for checking in and updating the designated plans.
Sure. But my point is that it is additional workload. Okay.
Got it. Which is
So-
your reasoning for the additional 8 FTs.
Correct.
So just to make sure I have this, you have 1 supervisor, 1 organizer, and then I'm assuming 6 core care coordinators.
Correct.
And how many care coordinators are staffed currently?
For that particular purpose, the unit would be identical. So we have the same number in the.
But how many are currently staffed?
To get the total number of care coordinators.
Can your team get that?
We have to get the total number to you.
You can't get it now?
We can get in a few minutes.
We're
Okay,
getting it. Yeah, we're
while
working
you're
on it.
searching for that, because I think this is important. Right now, you already have care coordinators. The Road Act is asking you, I do acknowledge that it will be more work, but the role of the care coordinator isn't changing. The timeline is changing. And so I'm trying to get a sense of why we would need to add so many FTEs in order to pull this off.
Because of the timeline change. Okay, so if I'm a manufacturer of widgets and I can do 1 per day, and you ask me to do 2 widgets, that would take me 2 days. But if you say I need it in 1 day.
And that's why it's important to know how many care coordinators are currently on staff.
Right, and we'll get that.
Okay.
But the care coordinators, so we've specialized that particular unit to do those assessments, right?
Yes.
The ones that are triggered by the notice of intent to commit. But care coordinators is a general job title. and they do many other roles. We have just specialized that particular unit. So care coordinators generally are also the ones that are managing and supervising youth in the community.
Yes, but
So
Director, you also dismantled the TDM teams, in part creating more care coordinators. And the TDM teams were responsible for doing what the Road Act is mandating now that you do, which is having a lot of these initial meetings, connecting with parents and the legal team, making sure there is a plan. So I think we should just be clear-eyed with the public that, yes, the Road Act is codifying a higher set of expectations than the agency is currently performing, but it's already what we should be doing. And so if there are different categories of care coordinators, it would be helpful for us to know this as we are trying to fund this in the budget. And I want to make sure you all have everything you need. But we also just need evidence behind everything in the budget, because respectfully, we can't just take a number just because it was given. We want to be able to verify the rationale. I do want to acknowledge we were joined by my Ward 2 colleague, Councilmember Pinto, and I'll turn to her next for questions. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question, but I really do want that number for care coordinators. At the March 2025 DYRS Performance Oversight hearing, DYRS, or you all, testified that care coordinators and general counsel are responsible for scheduling team decision-making meetings, or TDMs. Again, please identify by position number in the Schedule A, which positions are tasked with scheduling TDMs. This goes back to what we were just talking about.
So I believe in our response, we identified that specific position numbers. But as we've discussed, the TDM team was absorbed into care coordination, but the role of the TDM team still remains. So that work is still there. They still have to organize the TDMs, but that team decision-making meeting is different from what is contemplated in the Road Act. What's contemplated in the Road Act is a predisposition meeting, right?
Yes,
Which is
yes.
a different group of individuals coming together to give their information about what they think should be in a plan.
That's right.
So that is a different role than what the TDM team had been doing. And so that work still remains. It's just been
And the care
transferred to
coordinators
the
are now
care
doing that work.
coordinators to make their own TDM meetings.
I'm not going to have enough time, but it sounds like we may have an answer, or it seems like we may have an answer.
Yes, we do. The total number of medical staff, just to go back to that question, is 25, and the total care coordinators are 18.
So in the entire agency, we have 18. In order to pull off the Road Act, we need a third more care coordinators in order. That's the position of the agency.
That's correct.
Okay. What is the average length of time for initial screening meetings?
For initial screenings,
Yes.
talking about the
So the work that TDMs had been doing, that I'm assuming care coordinators are doing.
so the standard that we have set is that within 10 days of placement, a TDM should be scheduled. So I'll have to get you what exactly the average time is, but it should be all within 10 days
10 days of placement.
of placement.
And we heard testimony that some young people are languishing at YC for up to 8 months before being placed. So we are not conducting a TDM for 8 months for a young person, and then once they're placed, that we have 10 days. I know this is an area of contention, but we have to circle the wagon here. I'm gonna, for the sake of time, turn to my colleague, Councilmember Pinto, for a round, and then I'll turn to Councilmember Henderson.
Great. Thank you so much, Chairman Parker, and hi, Director Abed. Nice to see you and
Nice to see
team. So I have been looking into working with studying violence interruption for quite some time now. And one of the biggest gaps I think we have is that the authorizing statute that talks about violence interruption specifically says it should be geared towards people ages 18 to 35, which by definition leaves out everyone under 18 who need this type of work. And in kind of studying how our city has evolved over time with our VI work, it's interesting context to me that initially it was contemplated to be set up out of DYRS because there was a recognition at the time that there is a needed connection between credible messengers and supporting our young people and making sure we're interrupting violence there. And so as I look at the DYRS budget, there's a credible messenger program that I want to hear a little bit about and how that's going. But I see a reprogramming from the credible messenger program into the case management division. And so can you explain to me a little bit how the credible messenger program is going within DYRS and what that reprogramming is about? Do you feel that you have sufficient funding to carry forward this important work?
I'll talk about the Credible Messenger Initiative, and I'm curious about the reprogramming piece because we continue to fund the Credible Messenger Initiative.
Okay, I see a reprogram for $172,500. But go ahead, Director, and then we can get into the numbers.
So yeah, we contract with a number of different Credible Messenger providers, and they serve youth both in our facilities and in the community. Using the term mentor, I think is a little bit off, although they do things that are similar to what a mentor does in terms of giving advice to young people, trying to get them steered in the right direction, but they also go in the lane towards violence interruption. One of the programs that we operate in our facility is called Opportunity Over Ops. And this is where we partner with our credible messengers in the community to come and speak with our kids in the facilities, and also bring in folks from the communities that our kids are from that they look up to, or that they find as leaders, even if they are engaged in those activities, in an effort to try to deter them from continuing the neighborhood battles that we see. And so the credible messengers are really important in that role. They're also important in identifying risks in the community. So when we are considering a youth for release, the credible messengers will help us understand what risks are out there, if we might need to consider relocating somebody to somewhere else, or other types of safety planning activities that we need to do for our kids.
Okay, and how many credible messengers do you have in the facility?
I have to look at the total number. I believe we have 7 providers that we're using.
7 providers who are receiving grants, or several people?
No, providers that are receiving grants and recruiting credible messengers.
Okay. And then I imagine each of those 7 providers have their own cohort.
Correct.
And do we know about what that number is?
I can get back to you on the number
Okay.
and the breakdown.
That would be great. And how much are you spending on the credible messenger program?
I think it was roughly around 3 million that was for Credible Messenger. And that all kind of rolls up into that activity you see on here, community outreach. So Credible Messenger and community programming all roll into that particular activity. So the shift you were speaking of is like a shift from Credible Messenger to community programming, which is FTE.
So it's all going to the same
Yeah,
purpose.
it's all in the
the
same area.
practice.
Yes.
Okay. And those are all issued as grants?
Yes.
And what are some of the metrics that you're considering when you're reviewing applications for the grants of who can do this work? Are you looking at groups that do work in community? Or are you looking at groups that can quell beefs within the facility? Like, what are some of the highest considerations you're making?
So for our credible messenger programs, obviously we want those that have like experience, and that can relate to the youth that are in the community. Via the metrics that we would look at, we do have a quality assurance team that reviews deliverables that are outlined exactly in their contract. The providers have staffing that also report back to us on their outcomes, whether or not a youth gets a driver's license or if they reached a goal and, that they have outlined, whether or not they are, there is family engagement activities that are successful. So we look at all that as we review.
And when you mentioned driver's license, that's for the kids once they've returned to community?
Yes, I'm just specifically talking about those credible messengers that are in the community. We also have credible messengers that are in the facility that are working through goals that they need to achieve in the facility that is designed by any care coordinator that's working with them there.
Mhm. And are all of these people adults? All the credible messengers?
Yes.
And what's the youngest age child who's in your care or custody?
I believe currently, we have a 14-year-old is the young.
Okay. I raised that and I hope you wouldn't mind, Marcellus, me quoting you from an earlier conversation, but I think there's a lot of really interesting positive outcomes when young kids can hear from other kids who might be, 1 or 2 or 3 years older than them. I think of myself as young, but to a 14-year-old, I'm not quite within range. And so I just share that with you as kind of interesting work that others are doing to really have other kids be helpful messengers, and kind of making peace cool, for lack of a better word.
No, I understand the efficacy of using peers because young people are heavily influenced by their peers. I guess I would love to follow up with you on what literature that you've got, because I just have concerns about the distance from the activities that we want to deter, that those young people are far enough from that lifestyle that we're not doing
Creating
more
another
harm than
problem.
good.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And how are things going with Parent Watch?
Parent Watch is a valued partner. And I don't know if there she is. Miss Patterson is here today. We meet regularly to hear concerns. Ms. Patterson also serves as an outreach partner for families that are having difficulty. If we have any kind of unusual situation, oftentimes we will ask her to reach out to the family separate and apart from the agency because she does have that independence, and can help navigate through whatever the situation is. So I think the relationship is very strong.
Have you found that there have been pieces of advocacy or kind of information that they have been able to provide to you that has changed your strategy, whether that's around the assessments or the communications with parents?
I wouldn't say changed. I think shaped is probably the best way to look at it because we collaborate regularly. And so when I'm thinking about how we do something or how we approach something, we communicate with Ms. Patterson. I communicate with her, and some of my senior team as well, to identify how we can do things better. And I know she's not a shrinking violet. If she sees us engaging in anything that she has an opinion on, we're going to hear it as well. And we take that constructively.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's a really helpful and unique opportunity with DYRS in particular that there is engagement kind of on behalf of the families impacted, because this is a team effort to do well and to set people up for success. I'm out of time. I just wanted to share, as I do every year for the record, that when we talk about how important public safety staffing is, that includes DYRS. And we cannot have an agency that we don't fund properly to keep our kids safe, to keep DYRS staff safe, and it cannot be staffing that's cut short in my view. So hopefully we can keep working towards that shared goal. But thank you very much, and thank you, Chairman Parker.
Thank you, Councilmember Pinto. She pulled one of my moves and in the last few seconds. You give your closing statement, which carried you over for at least another minute, but no, you're always welcome. Thank you for joining. And Director, I too see the credible messenger line being zeroed out in future years, fiscal year 27, 28, 29.
Yeah, we've been trying to understand where that is coming from because it's not in our.
On your side, okay.
No, and maybe it's because it moved in the budget somewhere, but we fully intend to continue funding.
And
credible
you're
messengers.
expecting to maintain the same level of staff across all of those years?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to come back to the TDM versus care coordinator conversation. So based on our previous exchange, you have 18 care coordinators. They're not all responsible for the same things. Some at least are responsible for what the TDMs used to do, which is scheduling, connecting with parents, connecting with the legal representatives, the young person, ideally putting together a plan and ensuring there's a roadmap of sorts for the young person while they're in DYRS's care. Is that fair to say that's what a subset of these care coordinators are supposed to do?
Yes, they have a roadmap, and the supervision in the community after they leave is a large component of their workload as well.
And by that meaning, like where they're going to go.
Well, where they're going to go, and when young people are released, they have a plan for their release, and there are requirements that we have, and some of that can be to continue their rehabilitation. And we want to make sure that they are following through on those plans, that they're complying with all of the agreements that we've made with that young person when they're released, because the commitment remains. So when we get a commitment from the court, they may be committed for a number of a period of time, but that doesn't mean they remain incarcerated all that time. That just means they're under our care.
Yes.
So when they've completed the goals that we've set out and we release a young person, they're still committed to us. They're just now in the community and either receiving services or just being supervised to ensure that they are remaining lawful and compliant.
And so how many of those 18 care coordinators are responsible for the TDM responsibilities?
Well, each of them that supervises kids has to do their own TDMs.
Okay, so all 18 of them are doing some level of TDM activity.
Yes.
Got it. And then how many of them are supervising, following up with, supporting youth as they've been stepped down out of secure detention?
Whoever is on their caseload, other than the care coordinators that we carved out, which I think I said was 6, and I believe I was corrected that it's 5 in the current pre-commitment team. Those 5 are dedicated solely to doing those initial assessments when they come in, and then they will pass it off to the other members of the care coordination.
Got it. So 5 of the care coordinators are solely for those initial.
Correct. They're not doing the community supervision work. They are doing the assessments.
Okay. And what is the average caseload, if you will, per week, per month for those 5 individuals? What we're trying to get at is better understanding the need for 8 additional FTEs to implement the Road Act.
So I'll have to check and see what the actual caseload numbers are.
Okay.
If we don't have that available, but looking at the number of cases is not the best way, I think, to assess what we want to get to, which is workload. So you may have a number of cases that fall under your supervision, but what does that look like? Because a high intensity case, one where you have a lot of contacts, where you've got a family with a lot of needs, is going to require a lot more time. And I think if we want to do that, we would need to engage with a partner to do a workload study.
Okay.
And there are entities that do that.
Well, I just want to level set. It is our expectation to fund the Road Act. We will also fund components within the Committee of the Judiciary and Public Safety, as well as the Committee of the Whole for the Auditor. And I just want us to be on the same page that even if we don't land in an agreement that 8 FTEs is what it needs to actually pull this off, the expectation is the agency will honor the law. So I just want to level set. Part of, again, why I'm asking these questions is to better understand how you landed on the 8 FTEs. I get that there's some information that you need to follow up. I received a note here. The mayor's office hasn't given us a written response with TDM position numbers, but it should be coming after the hearing. I'm going to keep moving for the sake of time. So going back to TDMs, and I know that has been dismantled. It sounds like there's 18 care coordinators, 5 of whom are focused exclusively on these initial meetings. What we routinely hear is that since the TDMs have been dismantled, the meetings aren't happening. And based on what you're sharing is now the standard is we're going to have a care coordination meeting within 10 days of placement. But we know that we're struggling to get placements in check. So walk me through. Let's say I'm a young person and I'm at the facility for 2 months before I'm being placed, hypothetically speaking. What engagement, if any, would I have with a care coordinator while I await my placement?
I'm sorry, you're saying you have a youth that is,
If I'm a young person at YSC, I'm awaiting placement. It's roughly 2 months. What engagement in month 1 would I have with a care coordinator?
so you would have that engagement with the assessment care coordinator. They should have done an assessment with that young person. And
And roughly how, at what time should that have happened? That initial assessment?
that initial assessment should happen, well, obviously the Road Act has different requirements, but under the current status, once a youth is committed, we work to quickly do an assessment. I'd have to check to see if we have a procedure in place on the timeline for doing it. But every new youth that is committed to us is getting that assessment. And we will.
All right,
we
Director,
will
this
get
is your time to defend the agency, because what we hear from everybody else is that those assessments aren't happening. When I was at the facility last time, I think it was a young man I was speaking to. He had been there for 2 weeks and he hadn't talked to a care coordinator. He hadn't had an initial screening. He was actually asking, I want to say, the team members there where he should go or who he should advocate for. So if you could follow up, that would be helpful.
I'll follow up, and I think that we need to debrief when you have conversations with youth. Sometimes they forget what the purpose of a meeting was, and so I want to know.
And what about the adults who
who you
say that
met.
it's not happening?
Well, I understand that, but
Yeah.
we have stood up this team, and when we get those notices of intent to commit, we do engage in that assessment process. What happens though is we have to triage and try to determine who is actually going to be committed
Mhm.
and get those assessments done so that we can make the placements. Our providers, excuse me, our private providers require those assessments. So in order to make those placements, we have to do those assessments, and we are making placements. So they're happening, but I'll follow up with our team and
Okay.
deliver with some metrics on how quickly they're doing
And so
assessments.
are 100% of youth before they are placed receiving an assessment?
Of new youth committed, yes. Now, there was a backlog of assessments. And so there were youth that were placed without doing the YLS. But in terms of kids coming in with new commitments, they are getting assessed.
Okay. And what is the standard for the agency in terms of parent engagement before the placement?
Well, we seek out and invite parents to participate. We have to have a parent to complete the YLS. That is one of the challenges that we have in terms of completing YLSs quickly. It's not done just with the youth. We
But
have
that
to-
may or may not happen until 10 days before placement. according to the standard? I'm just going off of what you're saying. That these care coordinated, the standard is 10 days before placement.
10 days was, I believe, for the TDMs. Team decision-making should be happening. A TDM should occur 10 days from the date of placement.
Right.
Right, so what you're asking about assessments happen earlier in the process. The YLS assessment would happen earlier in
It
the
should
process.
happen earlier in the
Yes.
process, although you can't give a
But
timeline.
we can't place a youth without having that.
I got it.
assessment
I
done.
got it. And so we know, at least based on the previous statement, that it should happen at the very latest 10 days before placement. And you're saying it's happening before. So somewhere in between
Somewhere there, yes.
And you're saying parents are invited to these meetings.
Absolutely.
They have to be.
Well, I mean, if we cannot get a parent to participate, we still need to move forward with the assessment.
And what about the legal representative for the youth?
So I think you're talking about TDMs, and yes, with TDMs, we invite the legal representative and the parents to participate in. those.
100% of the time.
Yes.
Okay, because we've also heard that that is not happening.
Well, my understanding is that there are scheduling conflicts that we have. And so we do need to move on our processes. We can't wait forever because somebody is not available. And so our priority is to work with the parents to get dates for when we do a team decision meeting.
And do the legal representatives have to sign off on the placement agreement?
I don't believe they have to sign off on the placement. Not on the placement.
Not on the place. What about parents? So you said parents have to be involved
No,
in,
to make a placement, the court has ordered the placement, so it doesn't require any consent to make a placement. We want to involve families and the attorneys in order to help shape those plans, but it is not a requirement. that they
and your
agree.
expectation is that that should be happening at the TDM process. That should be happening on the early end of a young person's stay at YSC.
I think we're mixing TDMs and assessments here. So the assessment should be the first thing that we do,
Yes.
right? We do an assessment that is going to guide what the placement should look like. And then within 10 days of placement, we do a TDM. And that's to track the progress. How are they doing? But do we involve the family?
So
in
the initial
assessment?
assessment.
Yes.
All right. So just to make sure we're clear, the initial assessment is done in-house. Is that done with parents and legal representatives?
No, the initial assessment is done by our pre-commitment team.
Got it. Those 5 care coordinators.
Yes.
Understood. Is that information shared with parents and the legal representatives?
Yes, it's developed with the parents. We need the parents' input generally to complete those assessments.
The initial screening.
Yes.
Got it. All right. Then later down the line, within 10 days of placement, the TDM should be completed.
And so we work with the families to get the assessment done, and I will verify whether we are sharing the actual results of the assessment with attorneys.
Because repeatedly, we are hearing from parents, there is insufficient engagement. We are hearing from legal representatives, there's insufficient engagement. I heard from a young person directly, I've been here for 2 weeks and I don't know what's happening. No one's talked to me. So, I take your word, but Director, what you may think is the standard may not be playing out in different parts of the agency.
Absolutely, there may be instances where we didn't meet our own standard. That can certainly happen, and we would investigate that and correct it.
And it's helpful for me to get clear on this as we're thinking about staffing. So that's why I'm going down the rabbit hole here. I do want to keep moving. We have heard from youth and advocates that exit planning is also an area for improvement. You spoke previously about your desire to stand up an exit planning sort of team by January of 2026. Is that team incorporated within the budget?
Yes, and we've already stood that team up. So
Nice.
they are operational at New Beginnings. We do have the manager and the team members in place, and that is through our existing staffing.
And how many team members are on that exit planning team?
I believe we have 5 total. I believe it's 1 supervisor and 4 care coordinators, but I'll verify that number.
Okay. And can you walk me through the responsibilities? So, or I'm going to just share what I think I'm hearing you say. So, initial screening is done. TDM is done within 10 days of placement. Young person is placed. They go through their training. Ideally, there's some type of checking in on the plan, the roadmap designed for the youth. And at what point should the exit planning team be checking in to say this young person needs to be preparing to exit DYRS?
So yeah, we're developing the procedures for how we need to do that. And essentially, I think we're trying to align that with the Medicare reimbursement pieces. And I need to review the information, but I think it is.
That I think you all say you're going to do by October?
Yeah.
Okay.
but so we want to develop procedures that don't conflict.
Got it. I
And
understand.
so
And
I believe
our
it's 90 days.
And our
prior
expectation
to-
was
to
that
release.
it was going to be done by January, so you're ahead of schedule. So by January, is it safe to say you'll have those procedures in place for
Yes.
what this exit planning team should be doing, and what we should expect for the youth? But all right, if it's 90 days, obviously that's clear for the young people in New Beginnings, but I would imagine that's for young people regardless of where they're placed.
Correct. So that's why we want to have the same standard. Now, yeah, the reimbursement will apply at New Beginnings. It may not apply for the kids placed elsewhere, but we want to have one procedure that everybody follows regardless of where they're located.
Okay. And again, those are care coordinators, 5 total roughly, but you're going to follow up, and we'll follow up with questions just to get specifics on which team members are responsible for those exit planning teams. Several youth we spoke to at YSC noted that they wish they had direct workforce training aligned with their interests. We heard from a public witness today that spoke to the potential benefit of workforce training. How does DYRS determine in which fields to offer workforce training? And can you speak to any programs that are currently running or that will begin as a result of this budget?
So workforce training is going to be dependent on where they are in education and their age, relatively speaking. If they're a young person that is in the high school program, middle or high school program, and we have a mandate to continue education, we're going to continue education. They're not going to be doing workforce training. For older kids, for older people that, or for people under 18 that have completed a GED, those would be young people that are eligible for workforce training. And that's how we sort of filter for access to those programs.
The young people eligible for the GED training.
Young people that have a GED.
Have a GED.
So
Got it, got
they've
it.
completed their essentially completed their education, even if they are under 18, we would make them eligible.
And are there current workforce training programs at DYRS?
Yes, we have the Volt Academy, which is going to be doing, I believe, automotive and one other program this year. We have training through our achievement centers. There are a number of programs, and I'll have to defer to my colleagues to list out the programs that we're operating at the achievement centers. And we are looking to stand up workforce training in facilities as well. And so the obviously at New Beginnings, we have opportunities there. Those are committed kids. And so we are standing up, and I believe we've already started the automotive program there.
Nice.
And there's another workforce program, and it's escaping my memory right now, that we're doing there. We're also, and I know one of the questions that you had in your opening was about activities and training opportunities
Yes.
at YSC. We have started 4 new programs at YSC. One is an activities, a game room, and having an arcade night. One is called the Young Man Incorporated, but we also started a cosmetology program for young people in the in YSC, and we are looking to get a virtual automotive program stood up for Title 16 youth.
Do you have the funding necessary for that?
Yes.
So I just want to make sure. So you have game night, a cosmetology program, a virtual training program for Title 16 youth, and I missed the other.
There's another program. It's art and STEM programming. That is a program that we are operating with our staff.
Okay.
Councilman Parker, if it's okay, I'd like to add that we also will have a Young Play Bright summer program at YSC. And we have various family engagement activities that are coming out of Title I Part D.
A young playwright program,
Yes, summer program.
summer program.
In addition, with Volt, we have a nail tech program where you get a certification.
And are all these new or are these recurring programs?
In terms of, so Volt just started. Nail Tech has been going on in the Achievement Center. We are funding additional slots through Volt. So they had a cohort already, but we have additional slots that we added to since it's been very successful.
Nice. That's music to my ears. More activities for our young people.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to keep moving, but I may come back to this. Before I move on, there were some commitments that we had discussed in terms of like general activities and materials for young people across the facility. I'm talking books, puzzles, games. These seem great, but I'm imagining these are tied to incentives. You know, maybe you qualify to participate in an arcade or the summer playwright program. Are there any enhancements or planned activity enhancements for different units throughout the facilities?
Yes, some of these programs are directed to specific units like the Title 16 youth that are there for longer periods of time. That's why we're looking at that virtual automotive program for those youth. There are a number of activities. I believe we have a list of activities that are being led by our staff within the facility. Just give us a minute to tick through the list.
So we have the Tamar Y, which is a trauma, addictions, mental health and recovery for youth program. Arts and crafts, which they do tie-dye, epoxy, bracelet making
I
activities.
remember seeing that, yes.
Opportunity over ops, that assisting quelling community beefs. Life skills training, identifying emotional and self triggers. We also have a game room, which you might have seen. Positive peer relationships and how to cope with others. Anger management. We have a youth advisory board, poetry slam, cooking classes, board games.
And where are the board games? Because I've never seen the board games.
I think those would be brought out to the, there's a sort of multi-purpose unit.
Okay,
And we also might bring them to the living units as well.
okay. I will circle back to this. I did want to come to education since we're on this topic. I was completely dismayed in my last visit at YC, in part because, especially in the girls' unit, they were not receiving educational or a quality education. Let me say that. And instead, they were receiving these packets. We have since had conversations with Maya Angelou The summary of it is there is a discrepancy in what their contract provides versus the number of youth at YSC. Maya Angelou would say, we don't have the capacity to cover all of the youth with our current funding and resources. That said, can you clarify if the budget proposal before us is sufficient for addressing the needs posed by Maya Angelou, specifically that they would be able to provide instructional to support for every young person at YSC?
So, yeah, let me clarify how we're doing instruction and that particular unit that you're speaking of. We have a contract and we are engaged in negotiations. So I need to be sort of
Understood.
careful about how we do that. But when we go and have excess youth that are not in a particular classroom, which is that particular
Mhm.
unit that you spoke of, what we do is we distribute those kids into the other classrooms. So they are housed there for sleeping purposes, but during the school day, they go into the other living units, the respective living units that for education purposes and receive their education. Kids that get packets are only getting packets those first 5 days that they're with us before we've received their education information, or on rare exceptions when there is a conflict that has arisen and a youth cannot be placed in the classroom with another youth. Those are very rare occasions, and we have reviewed and audited that since your visit to ensure that, yes, kids are not getting packets in that unit. They are being transported to the educational spaces.
Well, I saw the packet. I have the packet. What I heard from the two young women is that they wanted to get out of that unit. There was no windows, the lighting was bad. They said they had been in that unit all week, that someone came in with a packet, gave it to them, and they were tasked with filling it out. If they filled it out every day, they would get a bag of chips on Friday. That was the extent of what I saw and what I heard from the young people there.
So if it was within their first 5 days, then
That is what we should expect.
that's correct. Until we
And
get
I
their
hope you would
education
agree with me
records-
that that's unacceptable.
Well, we can't put an education plan together before we get their educational records. That's impossible.
But we can certainly put the child in a learning environment that's not an isolated cell and a worksheet they probably can't read.
But that is going to be a class that is teaching with a curriculum. If we don't know where they are,
Okay,
how do
so
we-
beyond this, and I understand that you may be in the middle of negotiations with Maya Angelou. The discrepancy still stands that they would argue that that incident aside, they don't have the capacity to deal with any number of fluctuations that exist at YHC. So at the high mark of 126 youth, or if it's 90 youth, or maybe it goes beyond 126 youth. And I think it's reasonable to say it's unfair to expect them to say, all right, 4 teachers here on behalf of Maya Angelou, you're supposed to cover all of the facility regardless of how many youth we have. So how are we compensating that in the budget?
there is additional funding that was provided in the option year contract for Maya Angelou.
Okay, for this year.
For the option year that we are exercising.
There was additional, and how much additional funding is that?
I believe it was north of $300,000.
And the expectation is that that 300,000 will do what? Or get us what?
That would address the increased population.
Okay. And that $300,000 is included in the budget, the 26 budget?
Yes.
Okay. 370. Got it.
370. Thank you.
This is an aside. In terms of technology for learning, another challenge we've learned is that when you have a unit where a young person may be as young as 14 and old as 17, it's hard for any teacher to navigate that. Are there reasons why we shouldn't explore like implementing technology? And I know that if it's not managed well, can get out of control, but why not a personalized learning device or computer program that can meet a young person at their grade level, at their performance level, versus a one class fits all type approach?
That's something we can engage with Maya on, and I don't know what their capacity to do that kind of virtual.
Okay, I would love to
learning
work. I mean, that's just something I'm thinking of. Obviously, there would need to be a lot of support and compliance with that because we wouldn't want young people just surfing the net. But I know many of our schools are implementing these type of personalized learning programs that allow a teacher to provide more individualized instruction to some young people while others are still being catered to. But I will continue on. I will say on the education piece, I fully expect to supplement the education budget to ensure that we are adequately covering that. And as I mentioned, I did meet with the Maya team because I left pretty upset based on what I saw and what I heard. And I think it's a fixable issue. And so I look forward to working with you to solve it. The local financial plan expenditure growth assumptions. Got it. Let's go here. The fiscal year 26 budget proposal includes a roughly $1.8 million cut in one-time funding to the credible messengers budget line, but you spoke to that and you're saying that's probably one of those diffs issues that it's not accurate on our end.
That is not a dis issue. That was what was known as the building blocks before, where those were, initially those were,
From ones?
yeah, from ones, and I guess it was the mayor's, gun prevention director.
Yes,
And so those were federal funds from COVID funding initially.
got it.
That were utilized for that purpose. And I think they continued it 1 year after that with local funds. And so that's what that funding was for.
So that is not the credible messengers.
No, it is not.
Understood. Understood. Nine residential FTEs and were cut from New Beginnings and 12 were added to YSC. Can you walk me through the staffing plan and that might justify this adjustment? Again, 9 residential FTEs were cut from New Beginnings, it looks like, and 12 were added to YSC.
I think those are just shifts, I guess, that happen when I guess HR is funding what positions are needed. So those are just natural shifts that occur as part of budget formulation at the time to snapshot what was needed for the agency.
Okay, I was assuming you were going to say it's based on population, and since we're seeing more young people at New Beginning, YSC, you
Yes,
need more FTEs to be able to manage that.
When we hire staff, YDR staff and supervisors, they are hired and the expectation is they would work at either facility. And so we move them as we need to meet the needs of our operations.
Okay. The budget proposal includes an additional $1.8 million for your residential budget. What amount does your budget propose? What amount in the proposal allocates specifically for residential treatment center grants and subsidies in fiscal year 26?
Yeah, that is in what's called secure facilities. And so I think it's 1.9 million that's allocated toward residential treatment centers.
1.9 million, right.
Correct.
So as we're looking at it, the list of grantees under the cost total of roughly 9.9 million, but we are seeing 1.9 million as well.
Correct.
So why?
The difference that you see is a little bit between shelter homes, which we can fix that right there. Those that's capturing those call centers, but that's overall the total for residential treatment centers and shelter group homes and food costs that might be associated with everything in secure facilities.
So which is it? Is it 9.9 million or is it 1.9 million?
It's 1.9 for residential treatment centers specifically, but that number, it captures all the residential component, which includes group and shelters, but specifically for residential treatment is 1.9 million.
Got it. So the 9.9 includes residential shelter group facilities. 1.9 is just for the shelter. Residential, I'm sorry. Got it. Okay. There were also a number of grants or contracts, and we noticed a similar discrepancy that the contract amount was different than the allotted funding for the contract. Generally speaking, we can go one by one, but generally speaking, can you speak to why we are seeing a difference from the total versus what is noted for the contract?
I'll defer to program staff, but generally sometimes the contract amount can be different based on the option year and what they may actually need for the purpose of youth, but I would defer to operations on that.
So I'm looking here. I'm assuming this is the property management office, line item 70374. It was allotted in the budget for 451,000. Yet we are seeing a contract for 268,999. I'll give two others as an example. We talked about the residential treatment centers, New Beginnings. Is budgeted at 476,900, yet the grant period total for New Beginnings is only 235,000.
I think some of those are to be determined. Like, I know for like that, what you see at property management, that has a lot to do with supplies that they put in the warehouses. So some of those may vary, I believe, based upon the population.
Okay. And
So
I know
it-
you're citing food as part of the reason why some of these numbers fluctuate, but there is a food line item here. And there's also a discrepancy there. For education, I'll give one more example. It seems like in the budget is 787,900, yet the grant total or the contract is for, I'm sorry, 7.1 million. So there's roughly $775,000.
Yeah, part of that is accounted for, I believe is the contract. I believe that was for See Forever for education. I think another
Which
that
is
is wrapped
Maya.
in MOU.
So I'm assuming money was allotted in case there is a contract landed on between you all. And what I'm seeing here for the grant total is the current funded amount at 7.1 million.
That's the total amount, but depending on when the contract period is, we have funding in place for just that time period. We may need to add funding also to a contract depending on when the option years begins again.
So when you have an option year, so we have multi-year contracts, the out years generally contemplate some inflation, and so the value of that contract goes up. In addition, if you're looking at education, we did bump up the education budget separate and apart from the increase in the option year that was being exercised because of the higher population.
And do you have a timeline, now going back to education, when you may land on a agreement with See Forever or Maya?
We've made the proposal and we're just waiting for them to.
Can you share the proposal with us? And the reason I'm asking is because we plan to add additional dollars in the budget. And if you're taking care of it on your end, there's no need for us to duplicate that effort. I also think we should scrutinize Maya. So I don't think this is a blank check, but I think I want us to be on the same page here as it relates to education services. All right, we're moving. Overcrowding. The Youth Services Center has consistently experienced overcrowding, given its 98-bed capacity. As was mentioned in testimony today, I think we're over 100 now. A couple of weeks ago, we were near 130. How does the budget address these chronic trends that we're seeing in terms of overcrowding at YSC?
So with respect to the facilities, we do have some capital plans to enhance YSC. This is around the dining facility and to enhance some of the physical plant. But there is no room to add additional beds to YSC. That's just not an option on the physical footprint of that building.
We're
and
also
so-
not confined to YSC.
Well, we run New Beginnings, and that's a treatment program.
I know, but maybe as a government, we should be exploring investing in a new intake facility for DYRS. I know that's not what you're proposing. I know that's not what you're suggesting.
Sure.
I'm saying we're not bound by YSC as our only option because right now it does seem inadequate.
So, if we're looking at like a capital plan to have another facility or to acquire a facility, I will share with you that it is something I have looked into in terms of acquiring an existing retired facility. It hasn't come to fruition. So that is
Understood.
something that I have.
I'm glad to hear you think
explored
about
that.
it. Can you follow up and share the dining facility plans and upgrades with us?
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
But finding additional space is
I know.
very challenging.
I know. But I think that's where we as a committee can work with you all. When I was there, you have to do what you have to do, but young people were all over the place in intake sales because there just was no space.
Right.
And so
So I think another approach that we should look at collaboratively is really looking at a policy approach. Because I think that there are opportunities to detain fewer youth as well. And this really gets to the fractured process
yes.
of how youth are detained. But, if we could get the collaboration of Court Social Services Division to look at the detention assessment instrument that they're using, if they're using one, then we could evaluate what are the criteria that are being used to recommend detention for a young person, and does that correspond to actual risk of a new offense or risk for flight? Are we using the shelter beds appropriately? Because that should be guided, that recommendation should also be guided by that risk assessment instrument. And evaluate what alternatives can we build so that we can avoid unnecessary use of detention and bring those population numbers
Yes.
down as well, rather than just looking at expanding capacity.
Speaking, yes, all of that. I agree. And I look forward to working with you on that. I know we spoke during Oversight about the executive's goal of exploring unification. And I believe there's supposed to be a report or a summary of some sort sometime next year. Is sufficient funding included in the budget for your teams to do that?
There isn't funding in the budget for that. I think the idea would be that we would absorb the funding that Court Social Services currently utilizes.
No. I meant to come up with a proposal. So essentially, we're asking the executive, tell us how we should explore seeking unification. I know it's easier said than done, but there was a commitment from the executive to do that. And I'm just asking, is there funding or still a commitment to provide that level of planning?
I believe that commitment remains, and I don't think that there is additional funding necessary in order to
Okay.
develop the plan.
Got it. The supplemental and the fiscal year 26 budget both propose a surge in overtime at YSC and New Beginnings, roughly 66.7% increase or $2 million for fiscal year 26. You pointed to investments in recruitment and retention in your testimony. Can you elaborate on the mechanics of the strategies you're planning to fund to address staffing issues?
Right. So the big driver that we have and that we need and we have been trying to address is the staff unavailable to work. And it's a significant number of staff. I believe we have 35 at YSC that are unavailable to work. That's a lot of staff.
Because they were on some form of leave.
Some form of, protected leave. So the first thing that we did was to establish a return to work coordinator to address the inappropriate use of those leave programs and move those people off the rolls. And we have had some success there, although they seemingly move on at least as fast as we move them off. The other thing, and I think this is important to note, is that there were policy changes recommended in the mayor's budget
Yes.
to the paid family leave program.
For district agency employees,
Correct.
which I support.
Yes.
In fact, we were debating that as colleagues yesterday, and I referenced DYRS as an agency why this policy is needed. And so some of the change is in defining who is a close relative or a family member. And you're hoping that that will cut down on the number of staff you have out on leave at any given time.
By the changes of the definition, by the rhythm with which people can use it, because they can renew it every year. Those changes I think will be significant tools for us to aid that return to work coordinators' work in terms of getting people back. And then the other piece that I would highlight is the incentives for staff participation. And so what we've proposed there is to use money incentives for staff that don't call out. So if they have an exemplary record of coming to work, not calling out of work, that they should be incentivized. And we hope that that would prompt more people to.
And that's in the budget.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And how much is funded for that?
I think that falls in what's in that other pay, that 2 million.
Yeah, it's 2.2,
Yeah.
about $2.2 million for all of the incentives. So it's not simply just for that one piece, but for
And
retention
how
bonus.
often might these incentives be provided?
Have a schedule for that?
Are we thinking annual, quarterly, monthly?
Come to
Weekly?
the mic. Can you give up your seat?
I might add, like, in that 2.2 million, that is kind of what's that other pay that people honestly get paid as incentives anyway, whether they work at night or whether they work at other times. So I think it would be using that amount of funds to be able to fund that program. Because over many recent years, it's been trending below that $2.2 million mark, so.
Understood.
Just to add to.
And what's your name?
Oh, sorry, Lenny Moore, HR Director at DYRS. So with regard to the incentives that we're offering, the schedule for those would be for on an annual basis. When we talk about retaining staff that have been there for a while. Another incentive that we talked about was reliability, a staff call out incentive, and that would be on a weekly basis. Staff would receive incentives for not calling out during those critical shifts that we have. Where we have the needs, sorry.
That makes sense. And Director, and don't leave yet, HR Director, I have a follow-up question for you, but Director, I wanted, if you could speak to my colleagues who are thinking like, we should strike this from the budget, this is a bad idea. What might be the consequence or continued consequence if we don't make adjustments to our leave policies?
I think it just gives too many opportunities for individuals that are using that leave program inappropriately.
And
to
it's posing
to work the
a
system.
challenge for DYRS in
Yes.
in the spaces of safety and compliance and a whole host of things. And so thank you for that. I do plan to go to bat for that change because I do believe it's important for agencies like DYRS. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. HR Director, I know there are a number of hires. I imagine you don't have this available now, but can you follow up and share how many of your new hires are district residents versus non-district residents? Okay, we're gonna add that to our list. I am very keen on empowering district residents, hiring district residents. And while I know you all have focused on hiring, I want to make sure we're creating pipelines for Washingtonians.
I believe it is the policy of DCHR to elevate or give advantage to district residents and to district residents that were educated in the district as well. And they do that initial screening for our
Nice.
applicants.
Nice.
I'd also like to add that the gentleman that spoke earlier talked about the Pathways program.
Yes.
And that's another district program that highlights district residents that have graduated from DC schools, have been in foster care and other things like that, that they are able to also be prioritized with regard to hires.
Okay. Director, I wanted to come to fire safety. As you know, we had a roundtable and we invited the Office of Independent Juvenile Justice Facilities Oversight, Mark Jordan, to share with us. And I wanted to follow up on several of the commitments that you had previously made to the auditors team, just to see where we are. But before we get into the specifics, can you identify budget line items that speak to replacing fire systems and or making sure the agency is in compliance?
So the fire systems at YSC are being replaced. It
Currently.
is currently, that work has already begun as of the 5th. And we anticipate it taking 90 days, but that funding is within DGS. That is not in our
Understood.
budget.
Do you have a timeline when those fire systems should be updated by?
Yes, yeah, within 90 days. So they've already begun, and it should be, I guess by the end of September is their target for completion.
Okay. And then I'm going to go through the different commitments that you made to Mr. Jordan's team. So one was around a deficiency response plan around categorization and tracking. DYRS said you would have this in place by May.
So I'm going to allow Ms. Gilliard to respond specifically to those.
Okay.
But before I turn it over to her, I just need to frame this conversation around fire safety, because there was never a safety issue as was communicated. We had, let me just say this, the premise of the monitor of having what are essentially annual inspections done every month is a false premise to start with. That is not something that anyone is required. It is not required under the fire code. And this is an example of lawyers influencing what is a policy that's outside of their scope. Annual fire inspections are what are required. And so when the contract ended with DGS to do those monthly inspections, I immediately reached out to the fire marshal's office to assess what are the actual standards, because I've been doing this work for many years in multiple jurisdictions, and I've never seen a regime that required such frequency in fire inspections, and with the would amount to a complete annual inspection every month. So we have consulted with them, and they have articulated, I'll just say generally, that no, these are things that you do once a year. And so we are tailoring a new contract through DGS to do those inspections on the rhythm and on the guidance that we received from the fire marshal's office. With respect to the panel that was not functioning, that was also communicated with the fire marshal's office. And we did get guidance to do a fire watch procedure.
Yes.
And we have implemented that fire watch procedure. It was in place when you visited. We didn't get the opportunity to speak to you or to speak to Mr. Jordan to demonstrate that it was, but we do have the documentation to show that we have been doing that fire watch, and it is an hourly watch. We have a dedicated staff that moves through the facility. They have a checklist of things that they have to check on. And obviously, I mean, if there's a fire, they're going to report it. We have staff in our control center that have view of the cameras all the time, and they are actively engaged in monitoring the facilities because they're the ones that have to open doors. When somebody presses that button and says, I want to get through this door, it alerts them. It tells them exactly where that person is. They see the view. They can see, oh, that's Chairman Parker. We'll open that door. He's authorized to proceed. So it is not a passive view where they're just sitting and looking at monitors all day. They're actively engaged throughout
Yes.
and those are manned with 2 people, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And going back to the individual that does the fire watch, they do that fire watch and document their work. They have to send that documentation into our risk management office, and all of those documents are kept. So we maintain fire safety throughout this process. There is not a standard that requires us to do this monthly. That is not in the DC Fire Code or the National Fire Code.
I hear you. On the fire watch, there seems to be discrepancy. It seemed like what my understanding was is that the fire marshal said there did need to be these individuals identified as fire watch, and they needed to be in different locations throughout the facility. When I was there, I did in fact hear the team, and I don't think they were doing it because I was there. It seemed like it was part of the team meeting, so that was great. But it seemed like it was only one individual for the entire facility.
Right. There was a misunderstanding about who needs to be dedicated to fire watch. And we've worked that out with the fire marshal's office.
So just for clarity, is it one person or are you in fact supposed to have multiple?
It's one person.
One person
It is
for the entire
one
facility.
dedicated person on every shift. So they are constantly monitoring, and they're not just monitoring, they are looking for if there's a lot of trash in the trash can. That's a fire
Understood,
safety. It's
understood.
Remediate it immediately. If they can't remediate it immediately, then they are to engage with our risk management team to find a vendor to immediately remediate. So that's in place. The discrepancy, I think, that Mr. Jordan was alluding to was that there was this perception that we had to have a third person in the control center. So we have 2 people staffed there already.
Yes.
And that we needed yet another person that would just sit and look at the monitors and report a fire. Once I spoke with the fire marshal's office, they said, oh, we didn't understand that you already have people in that room and they do this 24 hours a day. No, you don't need that.
Understood. Is that written somewhere? Like, I take your word for it, but
Yeah, so I have an email exchange.
okay, if you could share that with us, because the last communication we received is the fire marshal saying you all needed to have these individuals around the facility. And so if there's been an update, I think that would be important for us to have.
Sure.
On the fire panel, and I do want to come to the commitments the agency made. Do you acknowledge that the fire panel was not working, is not working, or is it the argument of the agency, no, the panel is working?
No, it did stop working, and that's why we implemented the fire watch procedure.
Understood. Okay. Now I'm going to go through. So the deficiency response plan, this is tracking and categorization by DYRS's risk management division, and that was to be in place by May 2025.
Correct. That the implementation of that is already started. So we have a weekly risk register that we complete. And if there are any issues, we abate them with DGS.
And that list that lives with the risk management division.
We have a risk management division at DYRS, correct?
Okay. fire safety contracts by DGS and DYRS. It sounds like that is in place now, or it's in the process of being established.
That's in the process of being established, but we're well within the year since our last inspection, and it will
Correct.
be in place
Okay.
before the next.
The fire safety equipment inventory, that's an internal audit by the DYRS Risk Management Division. That's supposed to be done by August of this year.
Correct. That's underway as well. They are developing the tools to complete inventory.
And you believe it's on schedule to be completed in August?
Absolutely.
Okay. We have the remediation documentation system, like this digital archive of where systems are across the agency. And that too is supposed to be in place by August of 2025.
And we will meet that mark as well.
Okay. And then in the inspection form updates created by the Risk Management Division. And this here was that it seemed like DYRS was contracting out to different vendors. Different vendors had different policies, language, practices. And the recommendation was for you all to create your own internal inspection form and for that to be in place by September of this year.
That is correct. To create synergy so that we don't have different standards all over
Yep,
the place.
and that's on track as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so we will follow up and you will also share the update from the fire marshal. I think it is important in a facility like YSC especially that people are safe because you can't get out unless someone in that control tower is opening doors, as you know, Director. And I appreciate your partnership and working on this together. I wanted to come back to some of the things we had talked about before in our performance oversight hearing. We talked about this a little earlier, the list of activities, but are you able to share a list? It seems like you all have a list of new activities and programs you're running at YSC.
Yeah, that's going to be part of the supplemental responses for the
Perfect.
new questions, and we'll have those in there.
Perfect. Okay, I wanted to come back. Give me 1 second. I wanted to talk about the and follow up on something Councilmember Henderson was talking about, health access provided at the facilities. So I know DBH, well, let me ask, is DBH partnering into providing behavioral health, mental health support at YSC and New Beginnings?
We have our own behavioral health team that provides services, but DBH is a great partner. And when we have unusual events or things, they certainly do spring into action and assist us. But we do our own behavioral health services.
Okay. And I know I met members of that team before. How can you speak to how we're providing mental health support to young people at DYRS?
Yeah, so I mean, we have trained psychologists. So you met Dr. Key and Dr. Saliti. Those are two of our lead psychologists. When we're talking about the programming at New Beginnings, they are instrumental in developing the actual interventions that we use to try to move youth off of the behaviors that got them to be with us. And that is the type of treatment that we talk about in a treatment milieu. They have created that milieu. They're the ones that lead that effort. They also participate with the mental health needs that an individual has of diagnosed disorders. So if you have, you're suffering from depression, or you're suffering from schizophrenia, you're suffering from whatever, ADHD, we obviously also treat those DSM diagnosable conditions just the same. We also have in-house, we do have contracted psychiatrists. So if there are medications that need to be prescribed, we will engage our psychiatrist We also have a chief physician that can also prescribe and other staff. But typically, when we're looking at something like psychotropic use, we'll use the psychiatrist, the MD psychiatrist that we have contracted.
Okay. I wanted to come, and I know we've spoken, it's a blur at this point, but maybe a month ago, the youth that absconded from a facility outside of the district, and they've since been apprehended. But what the agency has done since then to ensure that that doesn't happen again at that facility or any other facility?
Certainly, as soon as it happened, we were notified by the provider of the incident. We coordinated with law enforcement to provide any information that we had to help apprehend those young people. And then we sent teams to the facility itself to evaluate exactly what happened and assist in corrective actions with their programming. So it amounted to an individual violating their own procedures. This was not a failure of their procedures as much as an individual not following the procedures that worked for them.
Is that staff person still
They've been
employed?
separated.
Understood.
They've been separated. And then they have updated their procedures to strengthen their security systems.
And has the agency looked at other facilities to do a investigation to ensure others are living up to their policies?
We haven't investigated anyone else. This was something that happened to them. We evaluate every one of our programs before we send youth up there. So we do have a compliance team that will go ahead of placements. We look at what are we requiring in that contract and trying to ensure that we have everything in the contract that we expect. And then now we are adding our policy and quality assurance teams. And one of their roles, and they participated in this as well, was to go and evaluate that program to help them with a procedural change, not just looking at the contract compliance.
Okay. One second. I wanted to come back to one last thing. We've gone through all of my questions and rapid fire. The healthcare general line with the increase of 648,000 and the 2 FTEs. Can you just repeat back the reason or the justification for the significant increase of that line item? I think the argument earlier was that it's in part for food. But if you can explain why that increase.
The increase was due to FTEs, 2 FTEs that were shifted over that way, as well as an increase in the subsidies and transfers, which are services that are provided for the youth medical services. So that was about 300, I think I want to say about 300K or so for the subsidies and transfers, which is for the care of youth, and the rest was associated with PS.
Got it. Okay. Well, as the next step, there are 3 broad buckets that I'm looking at for the agency to supplement the enhancements that the agency has already received. One is around how do we, on the front end, reduce the number of young people that are entering DYRS. And I really think that has a lot to do with truancy. I think there was a Washington Post article out this week that I think brilliantly connected those two. So this committee will be working with the Committee on Human Services to ensure that we can not only scale up the ongoing pilot at DHS to address truancy, but that we can actually move beyond pilot phase and actually do the work. It's worth noting that the mayor in last year's budget funded FTEs and DHS to deal with truancy. Unfortunately, they were removed in the budget process, but I continue to believe that our current approach, our bifurcated approach, where some are being referred to CFSA and others court social services, is not working. I'll give another just data point. More than 5,000 referrals are being made to CFSA, and they are following up with roughly 200 of them. That discrepancy is why so many of our young people are ending up at DYRS, and that is not a criticism of CFSA. they are not the right agency to be dealing with truancy, I would argue. So this committee this year will be looking at how do we prevent young people from ending up at DYRS. We will also be investing in programming, both educational and support for young people. That is why I'm keenly interested, and I love that you are already thinking about enhancing education. I don't want to duplicate your efforts, but I want to make sure young people have everything they need at DYRS to be successful, as well as we're setting them up for being out on their own once they leave DYRS's care. The third bucket is, as young people are exiting DYRS, how do we provide wraparound supports for them? We're trying to be creative and thinking about a case management model that will be external to DYRS for young people that need support to ensure they're going to school, to ensure they're working and on track to get their GED, whatever the case may be. These three buckets, in addition to the enhancements that have already been made to the agency, I think will continue to move us in the right direction. And I look forward to working with you, Director, to ensure that your goals are met, but that also we can ensure that fewer of our young people are ever needing to see your agency. So with that, I am going to adjourn our hearing for today. The time is now 3:21 p.m. And this budget oversight hearing with the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services is adjourned. Thank you.